Most people freeze when guns are pointed at their faces. They scream, dive under tables, or wet themselves in terror. At 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in downtown Chicago, Maya Chen did none of those things. She continued clearing table 12, her movements deliberate and unhurried, as if the three armed men who had just burst through Rosetti's front door were nothing more than impatient customers waiting for their check. The gunmen wore ski masks and tactical vests, their weapons sweeping the dining room in practiced arcs. The lead gunman, a mountain of muscle with dead eyes visible through the mask's cutouts, barked orders while his companions herded the screaming patrons into a corner. "Everyone down, hands where we can see them, nobody moves, nobody dies." Maya's hands remained steady as she stacked dirty plates with mechanical precision. Her polyester uniform was stained with marinara sauce and coffee, evidence of another double shift that had started at 6 that morning. The fabric clung to her thin frame, emphasizing the exhaustion that lived in her bones, the kind of tiredness that sleep couldn't cure. She had been invisible to the restaurant's patrons for 3 years, just another overworked waitress in a city full of them. But she wasn't invisible now. The lead gunman's head snapped toward her, his weapon following his gaze. "You deaf lady! I said get down!" Maya turned slowly, her dark eyes meeting his without a trace of fear. The restaurant fell silent except for the soft whimpering of customers pressed against the far wall. She held his stare for 3 heartbeats, then spoke in a voice that carried the kind of calm that comes from surviving things worse than robbery. "The register's behind the bar." She nodded toward the mahogany counter where the cash drawer sat. "There's about 400 in small bills, maybe 600 if you count the credit card tips we haven't processed yet." The gunman blinked, thrown off by her composure. His finger twitched on the trigger, but something in Maya's steady gaze made him hesitate. She wasn't challenging him. She was helping him do his job efficiently. From the corner booth in the restaurant's darkest alcove, Vincent Torino watched this exchange with the focused attention of a predator studying unexpected prey. He had been nursing the same glass of wine for 40 minutes, conducting business in low tones with his lieutenant Tony Marcelli when the robbery began. His first instinct had been to reach for the Sig Sauer tucked beneath his charcoal grey suit jacket, but the waitress's reaction stopped him cold. Vincent had seen men with military training face down armed threats. He had watched seasoned criminals maintain composure under pressure, but he had never seen a minimum-wage restaurant worker treat armed robbery like an inconvenient interruption to her cleaning routine. The lead gunman moved toward the bar, his companions keeping their weapons trained on the terrified customers. Maya resumed clearing her table, each movement economical and precise. No wasted motion, no trembling hands. Vincent noticed she kept her back straight, her breathing controlled, her attention split between the task and the men with guns. Professional awareness, combat training. The robbery lasted 4 minutes. The gunman emptied the register, grabbed the tip jar, and demanded wallets from 3 well-dressed customers before retreating toward the exit. As they passed Maya's table, the lead gunman paused. "You got steel nerves, lady. Most people would have pissed themselves." Maya looked up from arranging salt shakers with mechanical precision. Most people haven't had worse things than robbery happen to them. The gunman studied her for a moment, then laughed, a harsh sound that held more confusion than amusement. Then they were gone, disappearing into the Chicago night as suddenly as they had appeared. The restaurant erupted into chaos. Customers sobbed and reached for their phones. The manager emerged from the kitchen where he had been hiding, shouting orders about calling police and checking the register. Maya continued clearing tables. Vincent rose from his booth, straightening his tie with deliberate care. The suit he wore cost more than most people made in 3 months, tailored to accommodate both his athletic build and the weapon he carried. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and his green eyes held the kind of authority that comes from controlling life and death decisions on a daily basis. He approached Maya's section, stepping carefully around the overturned chairs and scattered napkins that marked the robbery's path. She was wiping down table 14 when he stopped beside her, close enough that she would have to acknowledge his presence. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that spoke of Italian grandmothers and family traditions. "Are you all right?" Maya glanced up, taking in his expensive clothes and the way he carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Her expression remained neutral, professional. "I'm fine. Did you want to settle your check before the police arrive? They'll probably want to interview everyone." Vincent smiled, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. "I'm not worried about the police." He pulled out a leather wallet thick with cash and placed $500 bills on the table she had just cleaned. "For your excellent service tonight." Maya stared at the money. Her tip for an entire week rarely exceeded $60. "That's too much." "No," Vincent said quietly, "it's exactly right." He leaned closer, lowering his voice until only she could hear. Most people would have been screaming or crying or begging for their lives. You treated armed men like they were customers who forgot to say please. Maya's hand paused in its cleaning motion. For the first time since the gunmen had entered, her composure cracked slightly. "I needed to finish my section. My shift ends at 10. "Your shift ended the moment those men walked in with guns." Vincent's green eyes searched her face, looking for the fear that should have been there. "But you kept working anyway. Why?" Maya resumed, wiping the already clean table. "Because panicking doesn't pay my mother's medical bills." The answer hit Vincent like a physical blow. He had expected bravado or shock or denial. Instead, she had given him the truth, delivered with the matter-of-fact acceptance of someone who had learned that survival required functioning regardless of circumstances. Vincent placed his business card beside the money. The card was cream-coloured stock with simple black lettering. Vincent Torino, Security Consulting. No phone number, no address. Just a name that carried weight in certain circles. "If you ever decide you want to do more than survive," he said, stepping back, "call the number on the back." Maya picked up the card, turning it over to find a phone number written in precise handwriting. When she looked up, Vincent was already walking toward the exit, moving with the fluid grace of someone comfortable with violence. The police arrived 7 minutes later, followed by paramedics and crime scene technicians who treated the robbery like the routine urban crime it appeared to be. Maya answered their questions with the same calm efficiency she had shown the gunman, providing accurate descriptions and timeline details that impressed the investigating detective. But as she walked to the bus stop at midnight, her fingers kept returning to the business card in her apron pocket. Vincent Torino had seen something in her response to the robbery, something that had prompted him to leave $500 and an invitation to a different kind of life. Maya pulled out the card and studied it under the harsh fluorescent light of the bus shelter. The rain that had been threatening all evening finally began to fall, turning the Chicago streets slick and dangerous. She thought about the way Vincent had watched her during the robbery, the way he had moved through the chaos afterward like a man accustomed to violence. She thought about her mother's mounting medical bills and the eviction notice taped to her apartment door. She thought about the way the lead gunman had hesitated when she met his eyes without flinching. Most of all, she thought about Vincent's final words, "If you ever decide you want to do more than survive." As the bus arrived, its headlights cutting through the rain, Maya slipped the business card back into her pocket. She didn't know who Vincent Torino really was, or what kind of security consulting required, leaving tips worth more than most people's monthly rent. But she knew that for the first time in 3 years, someone had seen her as more than just another invisible waitress. Someone had noticed that beneath the stained uniform and exhausted facade, Maya Chen was a woman who didn't break under pressure. The bus doors wheezed open. Maya climbed aboard, settling into a seat near the back as the vehicle pulled away from Rossetti's Italian restaurant. Through the rain-streaked window, she watched the city blur past, knowing that everything had changed in the span of 4 minutes. Tomorrow she would have to decide whether courage was worth more than safety, whether Vincent Torino's interest was opportunity or danger, whether a woman who had spent 3 years being invisible was ready to be seen. The Castellano Social Club occupied a narrow building in Little Italy that had served as a gathering place for powerful men since Prohibition. Maya entered through the main entrance at 8:30 p.m. on Friday night, carrying a medical bag and wearing the kind of conservative business attire that suggested competence without drawing attention. Her credentials identified her as Dr. Sarah Martinez, a private physician specializing in cardiac care for elderly patients. The bouncer at the door, a mountain of muscle named Sal, who probably had an arrest record longer than Maya's medical training, barely glanced at her identification before waving her toward the private elevator that led to the third-floor poker room. "Doc Martinez?" Sal's voice carried the kind of respect reserved for people who kept important men alive. "Mr. Graziano is expecting you. Third floor, room 312. Maya nodded professionally, stepping into the elevator with the calm composure she had learned to maintain, regardless of circumstances. As the doors closed, she felt the familiar pre-combat clarity that had served her well in Afghanistan and during the warehouse firefight. Her heart rate was steady, her breathing controlled, her mind focused entirely on tactical objectives. Through her earpiece, Vincent's voice provided final intelligence updates. Overwatch to medical, target is in position, 4 additional players at the table, standard security complement of 6 men positioned around the perimeter. Maya keyed her throat mic with a subtle gesture. Medical to Overwatch, understood, initiating approach. The elevator opened onto a hallway lined with photographs celebrating decades of Italian-American culture, legitimate community achievements mixed with images of men whose wealth had come from less legal enterprises. Maya walked toward room 312 with the measured pace of a medical professional making a routine house call. Inside the poker room, Tommy Castellano held court at a felt-covered table that had probably seen millions of dollars change hands over the years. He was smaller than Maya had expected from surveillance photographs, a compact man in his 50s whose expensive suit couldn't quite disguise the desperation that clung to him like cheap cologne. Dominic Graziano sat to Castellano's right, his weathered hands holding cards with the practiced ease of someone who had been gambling professionally since before Maya was born. The old man's complexion was slightly flushed, his breathing shallow in the way that indicated stress on a compromised cardiovascular system. "Mr. Graziano?" Maya approached the table with professional courtesy. "I'm Dr. Martinez. Your cardiologist asked me to check on you during any strenuous activities." Graziano looked up from his cards with genuine relief. "Doc, perfect timing. Been feeling a little short of breath since the betting got heavy." Maya set her medical bag on a side table and began extracting diagnostic equipment with practiced efficiency. Blood pressure cuff, stethoscope, portable EKG machine, all legitimate medical devices that also provided perfect cover for her real purpose. Tommy Castellano watched the proceedings with the calculating attention of someone whose survival had always depended on recognizing potential threats. "Doc, how long is this going to take? We're in the middle of serious business here." Maya met his gaze directly, noting the bloodshot eyes and nervous energy that suggested someone operating under extreme stress. "Just a few minutes, Mr. Castellano. Cardiac monitoring is routine for patients with Mr. Graziano's medical history." As Maya worked, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around Graziano's arm, she catalogued the tactical situation with military precision. 6 armed men positioned around the room's perimeter, 2 more visible through the doorway leading to the hallway. All carrying concealed weapons, all focused on external threats rather than internal ones. 140/95, Maya announced, reading Graziano's blood pressure. "Elevated, but not dangerous. Let me check your heart rhythm." Maya positioned the stethoscope with deliberate care, using the examination as cover to study Castellano's positioning relative to the other players. He sat with his back to the room's main window, flanked by bodyguards who watched the door, but not the medical consultation occurring 3 feet from their boss. Through her earpiece, Vincent's voice provided tactical updates. Medical, police patrol schedule shows 15 minutes until next drive-by. Window for extraction remains open. Maya completed Graziano's cardiac assessment, making notes on a legitimate medical chart while her left hand moved to the specialized medical device concealed in her equipment bag. The injector looked like a standard epinephrine auto-injector, but contained a custom compound that would stop a human heart within 30 seconds. "Mr. Graziano, your heart rhythm is stable, but I want to administer a mild cardiac stimulant as a preventive measure," Maya said, removing the injector with professional efficiency. "This will help maintain optimal circulation during stress." Graziano nodded gratefully, extending his arm for the injection. Maya administered the legitimate medication with practiced competence, then turned her attention to packing her equipment. "Mr. Castellano," Maya said, approaching his chair with the same professional courtesy she had shown Graziano. "I couldn't help noticing that you seem to be experiencing some cardiovascular stress yourself. Elevated respiratory rate, slight perspiration, hand tremors when you're not holding cards." Castellano's eyes sharpened with suspicion. "Lady, I don't need medical advice from some rent-a-doc." "Of course not, but cardiac events can be unpredictable, especially in high-stress environments." Maya's voice carried absolute medical authority. "It would only take 30 seconds to check your blood pressure. Consider it preventive care." The offer sounded reasonable, professional, exactly the kind of service that wealthy men expected from private physicians. Castellano's bodyguards remained focused on external threats, seeing no danger in a medical consultation that had already been provided to one of the poker players. "Fine," Castellano said irritably, "but make it fast. We got business to finish." Maya positioned herself beside Castellano's chair, close enough to detect the expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask the smell of fear-induced sweat. As she wrapped the blood pressure cuff around his arm, her free hand palmed the second injector from her medical bag. "This might feel a little tight," Maya said, inflating the cuff while positioning the concealed injector against Castellano's forearm. "Just relax and breathe normally." The injection was administered with the same smooth professionalism she'd used for Graziano's legitimate medication. Castellano felt nothing more than the brief pressure of medical equipment against his skin. "Blood pressure is elevated, but not critically," Maya announced, removing the cuff and beginning to pack her equipment. "I'd recommend reducing stress levels and getting regular cardiac monitoring." Castellano nodded dismissively, already returning his attention to the poker game. "Yeah, Doc, I'll keep that in mind. Thanks for the advice." Maya finished packing her medical bag and moved toward the door with the unhurried pace of someone completing routine professional duties. "Mr. Graziano, continue taking your prescribed medications and avoid excessive stress. Good evening, gentlemen." As Maya reached the hallway, she heard Castellano's voice behind her. "All right, where were we? I believe the bet was 50,000 to me." Maya walked toward the elevator, counting seconds in her head. 28, 29, 30. Through her earpiece, Vincent's voice crackled with tension. "Medical status report." Maya pressed the elevator call button with steady hands. "Medical to Overwatch. Patient consultation completed successfully. Proceeding to extraction point." Behind her, she heard the sound of cards hitting the floor, followed by urgent voices and the scrape of chairs being pushed back from the poker table. Someone was shouting for help, another voice demanding that someone call 911. The elevator doors opened. Maya stepped inside and pressed the button for the ground floor, listening to the growing chaos on the third floor as Tommy Castellano's cardiac arrest created exactly the kind of medical emergency that would overwhelm his security team's ability to respond effectively. As the elevator descended, Maya felt the familiar post-combat clarity that followed successful operations. She had eliminated a primary threat to Vincent's organization and her own survival without firing a shot, without creating evidence that would trigger law enforcement investigation, and without collateral damage to innocent bystanders. The elevator reached the ground floor. Maya walked through the social club's main room with the same professional composure she had maintained throughout the evening, nodding politely to the bouncer who held the door open for her. "Thanks, Doc," Sal said respectfully. "Mr. Graziano feeling better?" "Much improved. Sometimes all it takes is proper medical attention." Maya's smile was warm and professional. "Good evening." Maya walked 3 blocks through Little Italy's narrow streets before reaching the extraction point where Vincent waited in his armoured Lincoln. She slid into the passenger seat, setting her medical bag carefully in the footwell while Vincent assessed her condition with the focused attention he brought to all post-operation debriefings. "Status?" Vincent asked as the car pulled away from the curb. "Target eliminated. Natural causes, no evidence of foul play, no witnesses to anything beyond routine medical consultation." Maya's voice carried the matter-of-fact tone she had learned to use when reporting tactical results. "Tommy Castellano died of cardiac arrest in front of 6 witnesses who will testify that a licensed physician was attending to another patient when it happened." Vincent's smile was brilliant and genuinely admiring. "Maya Chen, that was the most elegant assassination I've ever witnessed." Maya leaned back against the leather seat, feeling the adrenaline slowly dissipating as the immediate danger passed. "It wasn't assassination, Vincent. It was preventive medicine. Tommy Castellano was a cancer that would have metastasized if left untreated." Vincent reached for her hand, interlacing their fingers with the intimate familiarity that had become natural between them. "How do you feel? Any regret? Any second thoughts?" Maya considered the question while watching Chicago's nightlights blur past the car's bulletproof windows. "I feel like we just eliminated the last major threat to the future we want to build together. I feel like we can finally stop looking over our shoulders and start planning beyond immediate survival." Vincent's grip tightened almost imperceptibly. "Maya, do you understand what you've accomplished tonight? You've just solved a problem that could have taken months of open warfare to resolve, and you did it without a single casualty on our side." "I did it because someone needed to, and I was the person best positioned to do it safely." Maya turned to study Vincent's profile in the passing streetlights. "Vincent, I want you to know that I don't take any of this lightly. I don't kill people because it's easy or because I enjoy it. I kill people because it's sometimes the only way to protect the people I love." Vincent was quiet for several minutes, processing Maya's words while navigating through Chicago traffic toward the safe house where they could decompress from the evening's operation. "Maya," Vincent said finally, "when I first offered you that job 6 months ago, I thought I was hiring a medic who could function under pressure. I had no idea I was recruiting someone who would become the most dangerous and most essential person in my life." Maya smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest, despite everything they had endured to reach this moment. "Vincent Torino, 6 months ago, I thought I was just accepting temporary employment to solve an impossible financial problem. I had no idea I was choosing a partner who would help me discover exactly who I was meant to become." As the car carried them through the Chicago night toward whatever came next, Maya realized that Tommy Castellano's death represented more than just the elimination of a threat. It marked the completion of her transformation from invisible waitress to visible queen, from someone who survived through hiding to someone who thrived through decisive action. The woman who had once cleared tables at Rossetti's Italian restaurant was gone forever. In her place was someone who could eliminate enemies with the same steady hands that had once served coffee to strangers. Someone who had chosen love over fear, partnership over safety, and power over invisibility. Maya Chen had become exactly who Vincent Torino needed her to be. Now they could discover who they would become together. 6 months after Tommy Castellano's cardiac arrest at his weekly poker game, Maya Chen stood in the executive boardroom of Torino Medical Solutions, reviewing quarterly reports that showed their legitimate healthcare consulting business had expanded into 3 additional states. The transformation was remarkable, What had begun as a front for treating criminal injuries had evolved into a genuine medical empire that generated more revenue than Vincent's traditional enterprises. Maya wore a tailored charcoal grey suit that emphasised her new role as Chief Medical Officer of an organisation that employed 47 licensed physicians and operated 6 private clinics across the Midwest. Her appearance commanded respect in corporate boardrooms and medical conferences, a far cry from the stained uniform and exhausted invisibility of her waitressing days. The conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of Chicago's financial district, where autumn sunlight painted the city's steel and glass towers in shades of gold and amber. Maya had grown to love this view, the visual reminder that she and Vincent had built something legitimate and lasting from the foundation of their violent origins. Vincent entered the boardroom, carrying coffee and the morning intelligence briefings that remain part of their daily routine, though the nature of those briefings had changed dramatically since Castellano's elimination. His expensive suit was now complemented by medical industry credentials and a reputation as one of Chicago's most innovative healthcare entrepreneurs. "The Detroit expansion is ahead of schedule," Vincent said, settling into the chair beside Maya's position at the head of the mahogany conference table. "Our trauma specialists have reduced emergency response times by 30% in the neighbourhoods we serve." Maya smiled, reviewing the medical statistics that demonstrated their clinics were genuinely saving lives rather than just providing cover for criminal activities. "Dr. Patterson thinks we can replicate the Detroit model in Cleveland and Milwaukee. The demand for discreet, high-quality emergency medicine is apparently universal." Vincent studied the financial projections with the same calculating attention he had once brought to territorial disputes and revenge planning. "Maya, we're approaching a decision point about the future direction of our operations." "What kind of decision point?" "The medical business is generating enough legitimate revenue that we could phase out the traditional family enterprises entirely. Docs, unions, protection services, everything our organisation was built on." Vincent's green eyes held a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. "We could become completely legitimate within 18 months. Maya set down her quarterly reports, giving Vincent her full attention. The possibility of leaving criminal enterprises behind had been a distant dream when she first accepted his job offer. Now it represented a genuine choice between the life they had built and the life they could build. "What would that look like practically?" Maya asked. "It would look like you and me running a medical empire that employs thousands of people in legitimate healthcare services. It would look like using our expertise in crisis management and emergency response to save lives instead of taking them." Vincent's voice carried genuine enthusiasm. "Maya, we could build something that makes the world better instead of just protecting our piece of it." Maya walked to the boardroom windows, looking out at the city that had become their shared territory through violence and careful planning. Chicago stretched endlessly in all directions, an urban maze containing millions of people who would never know that their safety had been purchased through the elimination of predators like Tommy Castellano. "There's something I need to tell you first," Maya said quietly. "Something I've been waiting for the right moment to share." Vincent joined her at the windows, his proximity generating the familiar warmth that had become automatic whenever they were alone together. "What is it?" Maya turned to face him, her dark eyes holding excitement and nervousness in equal measure. "I visited my mother yesterday. For the first time in 8 months, she recognized me. Actually recognized me, remembered my name, asked about my life." Vincent's expression shifted to genuine happiness. "Maya, that's incredible news. How long did the recognition last?" 47 minutes, long enough for me to tell her about you, about the work we're doing, about the life we've built together." Maya's voice carried wonder at the memory. "Vincent, she's proud of me. She understands that I found someone who values my strength instead of trying to protect me from my own capabilities." Vincent's hand found hers, interlacing their fingers with the intimate familiarity that had developed over months of shared danger and mutual protection. "What did you tell her about us?" "I told her that I'm in love with a man who sees me as an equal partner in building something important. I told her that we're creating opportunities for people to receive medical care without judgment or legal complications." Maya's smile was brilliant and genuine. "I told her that her daughter had become someone who protects people instead of just serving them coffee." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, processing the significance of Maya's mother recognizing and approving their relationship. Margaret Chen's opinion mattered to Maya in ways that transcended rational calculation, representing validation from the woman who had sacrificed everything to give her daughter opportunities in America. "Did you tell her about the proposal?" Vincent asked softly. Maya's heart skipped a beat. "What proposal?" Vincent released her hand and reached into his suit jacket, withdrawing a small velvet box that he had clearly been carrying for some time. "The proposal I've been planning since the night you eliminated Castellano, the proposal that would make our partnership official in every sense that matters." Maya stared at the jewellery box, feeling her breathing become irregular as she processed what Vincent was offering. Marriage represented more than just legal recognition of their relationship. It meant choosing each other permanently, building a future that transcended the tactical necessities that had brought them together. "Vincent?" "Maya Chen, 6 months ago you saved my life by choosing violence over moral certainty. You've spent every day since then proving that you're the strongest, most dangerous, most essential person I've ever known." Vincent opened the box to reveal an engagement ring that somehow managed to be both elegant and practical. Beautiful enough for corporate boardrooms, but subtle enough for tactical operations. "Will you marry me?" Maya looked at the ring, then at Vincent's face, then at the view of Chicago spreading endlessly beyond the boardroom windows. The city represented everything they had survived and everything they had built together, a legitimate medical empire rising from the foundation of calculated violence and mutual protection. "Yes," Maya said simply. Vincent's smile was brilliant and relieved. "Dr. Maya Chen, you've just made me the happiest and most dangerous man in Chicago." Maya laughed, extending her hand so Vincent could slide the engagement ring onto her finger. The weight felt perfect, substantial without being ostentatious, exactly the kind of jewellery that would suit someone who needed to maintain professional credibility while being prepared for tactical situations. "Mrs. Maya Torino has a nice ring to it," Maya said, admiring the way the diamond caught the afternoon sunlight. "Though I'm keeping my medical licence under Chen, professional continuity." Vincent pulled her closer, his arms encircling her waist with possessive tenderness. "Maya, there's something else, something I want to do before we get married." "What?" "I want to take you back to Rossetti's Italian restaurant. I want to have dinner at the same table where I first watched you treat armed robbery like an inconvenience." Vincent's green eyes held warmth and mischief in equal measure. "I want to show the hostess who used to be invisible exactly how visible she's become." Maya felt tears threaten at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming recognition of how far they had travelled together. "Vincent Torino, that's the most romantic thing anyone has ever suggested." 2 hours later, Maya and Vincent sat at table 14 in Rossetti's Italian restaurant, the same location where their relationship had begun, with $500 in cash and a business card that promised alternative employment. Maya wore the engagement ring and a black cocktail dress that emphasized her transformation from exhausted waitress to confident medical executive. The restaurant looked exactly as Maya remembered: mahogany paneling, crystal chandeliers, and the kind of intimate atmosphere that made customers feel like they were dining in someone's elegant home rather than a commercial establishment. But everything felt different when experienced from a position of power rather than servitude. Their waitress was a young woman named Sarah, who moved through her section with the same mechanical efficiency Maya had once displayed, the same invisible competence that allowed customers to ignore her presence while she ensured their comfort. Maya watched Sarah work, remembering exactly what it felt like to be essential but unacknowledged. "Sarah," Maya said when the waitress approached their table, "could you join us for a moment? I'd like to ask you something." Sarah looked confused, but approached cautiously, probably wondering if she had committed some service error that required correction. "Yes, ma'am?" Maya studied the young woman's face, noting the exhaustion that lived in her bones, the kind of tiredness that sleep couldn't cure. "How long have you been working here?" "About 8 months. Is there a problem with the service?" "No problem at all. Your service has been excellent." Maya reached into her purse and withdrew a business card for Torino Medical Solutions. "Sarah, how would you feel about a career change? We're looking for people with customer service experience to join our patient care coordination team." Sarah stared at the business card with the same expression Maya had worn when Vincent first offered her alternative employment. "I don't have medical training." "We provide training. What we can't provide is the ability to function under pressure while maintaining composure and attention to detail." Maya's smile was warm and genuine. "Those are skills you already possess. The rest is just technical knowledge." Vincent watched the exchange with growing admiration, recognizing that Maya was offering Sarah the same kind of opportunity he had once offered her, a chance to transform survival into something approaching prosperity. The starting salary is $45,000 annually, plus full medical benefits and advancement opportunities based on performance, Maya continued. "If you're interested, call the number on the card and mention that Dr. Chen recommended you for the patient coordination program." Sarah clutched the business card like it represented salvation from invisible exhaustion. "Dr. Chen, thank you. I'll call tomorrow morning." As Sarah returned to her duties, Maya felt Vincent's hand cover hers on the white tablecloth. "Maya Chen, watching you offer that young woman a future reminds me exactly why I fell in love with you." Maya squeezed his hand gently. "She reminds me who I used to be, someone who was competent and invisible, someone who deserved better than what she was accepting. And now—" Maya looked around the restaurant where she had once cleared tables for tips, then at the engagement ring that caught the light from crystal chandeliers, then at Vincent's face where she saw pride and love and the promise of continued partnership. "Now I'm someone who has the power to create opportunities for other people, someone who can transform survival into genuine prosperity." Maya's voice carried absolute conviction. "Vincent, we're not just building a medical business, we're building something that creates possibilities for people who think they're trapped in impossible circumstances." Vincent raised his wineglass in a toast. "To Maya Torino, the most dangerous woman in Chicago, who uses her power to make the world better instead of just protecting her piece of it." Maya clinked her glass against his. "To Vincent Torino, who saw potential in an invisible waitress and helped her discover exactly who she was meant to become." As they finished dinner in the restaurant where their relationship had begun, Maya realized that the transformation was complete. She had evolved from someone who served others to someone who protected others, from someone who survived through invisibility to someone who thrived through decisive action. The woman who had once cleared table 14 was gone forever. In her place was someone who could build medical empires, eliminate threats, and create opportunities for people who needed them most. Maya Chen had become exactly who she was meant to be. Now she and Vincent would discover what they could build together with the foundation of everything they had survived. The wedding ceremony took place in the private chapel of the Palmer House Hilton, a space that had witnessed the union of Chicago's most powerful families for over a century. Maya stood before an altar decorated with white roses and Italian cypress, wearing a designer gown that managed to be both elegant and practical. Beautiful enough for the society photographers documenting the event, but designed to accommodate the discreet protection she now carried as a matter of course. Vincent wore a tailored tuxedo that emphasized his transformation from street-level enforcer to legitimate healthcare entrepreneur, though Maya knew the shoulder holster remained beneath the expensive fabric. Some habits from their violent origins would never completely disappear, but they had learned to integrate necessary precautions into their new lives with sophisticated subtlety. The guest list read like a directory of Chicago's legitimate power structure: medical professionals, corporate executives, and political figures who had come to respect the Torino Medical Solutions empire. But Maya recognized several faces from their criminal past, men who had transitioned alongside Vincent from territorial enforcement to corporate security consulting. Marco Benedetti served as Vincent's best man, his presence a reminder of the gunshot wounds Maya had treated during her first week in Vincent's organization. Dr. Elena Rodriguez from Willowbrook Memory Care stood as Maya's matron of honor, representing the medical community that had embraced Maya's transition from combat medic to healthcare executive. Father Dominic Rossini, the elderly priest who had baptized Vincent 37 years earlier, conducted the ceremony with the kind of gravitas that comes from officiating unions between people who understand the weight of permanent commitments. "Vincent Michael Torino," Father Rossini intoned, "do you take Maya Lin Chen to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, in good times and bad, for as long as you both shall live?" Vincent's green eyes held Maya's gaze with the same intensity she had learned to associate with his most important decisions. "I do." "Maya Lin Chen, do you take Vincent Michael Torino to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, in good times and bad, for as long as you both shall live?" Maya felt the weight of the moment, the recognition that she was formally choosing partnership with a man whose love had transformed her from invisible waitress to visible queen. "I do." Father Rossini smiled with genuine warmth. "By the power vested in me by the state of Illinois and the Holy Roman Catholic Church, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Vincent, you may kiss your bride." Vincent's kiss was gentle and possessive in equal measure, sealing their partnership in front of Chicago's most influential witnesses. Maya felt herself melting into the contact, her body responding to the familiar electricity of his touch despite the formal setting. The reception that followed was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, a space decorated with enough flowers to stock a commercial greenhouse and enough security to protect a head of state. Maya and Vincent moved through the celebration with the fluid grace of people accustomed to managing complex social dynamics while maintaining constant awareness of potential threats. During the dinner service, Maya found herself seated beside Detective Patricia Morrison, one of the few law enforcement officials who had maintained cordial relations with Vincent's organization throughout its transformation from criminal enterprise to legitimate business. "Mrs. Torino," Detective Morrison said, raising her champagne glass in a subtle toast, "congratulations on everything you've accomplished in the past year. The emergency response improvements your clinics have implemented have saved 17 lives in my district alone." Maya clinked her glass against Morrison's, appreciating the recognition that their medical work was generating genuine public benefit. "Detective, we're just applying military emergency medicine protocols to civilian crisis situations. The techniques aren't new. We're just implementing them more efficiently." "Well, whatever you're doing, it's working. Chicago's trauma mortality rates have dropped by 12% since your clinic started operating." Morrison's expression grew more serious. "Maya, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "How do you reconcile your medical ethics with your husband's business background? I know Vincent's past, and I know the transitions haven't always been peaceful." Maya considered the question while watching Vincent navigate conversations with Chicago's medical establishment, noting how completely he had adapted to legitimate business relationships. "Detective, I've learned that sometimes the most ethical choice is the one that prevents the most harm, even if it requires methods that seem morally ambiguous." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "That's a very pragmatic approach to medical practice." "It's a combat medic's approach to medical practice. Sometimes you have to make choices in seconds that other people get to deliberate for hours." Maya's voice carried the conviction of someone who had faced life-or-death decisions under extreme pressure. Vincent and I have built something that helps people who fall through the gaps in conventional healthcare. That matters more to me than whether our methods would satisfy academic ethicists. As the evening progressed, Maya noticed a disturbance near the ballroom's entrance, raised voices, the subtle tension that indicated potential conflict. She moved toward the commotion with the measured pace of someone prepared to handle whatever crisis had developed. A young man in an expensive but ill-fitting suit was arguing with hotel security, his voice carrying the kind of desperation that Maya recognized from her own financial struggles before accepting Vincent's employment. The man appeared to be in his mid-20s, well-educated, but clearly experiencing the kind of economic pressure that drove people to make dangerous choices. "I just need 5 minutes with Mr. Torino," the young man was saying to the security guard. "I have a business proposition that could benefit both of us." Maya approached the situation with the calm authority she had learned to project during medical emergencies. "I'm Mrs. Torino. Is there something I can help you with?" The young man turned toward Maya with expression that mixed hope and embarrassment. "Mrs. Torino, my name is David Chen, no relation despite the name. I'm a medical student at Northwestern, and I've been following your organization's work in emergency trauma care." Maya studied David's face, noting the exhaustion around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands that suggested someone operating under significant stress. "What kind of business proposition?" "I'm 3 months behind on tuition, facing expulsion from medical school unless I can generate $12,000 by next Friday." David's voice carried the same desperate honesty Maya had heard in her own voice when she first called Vincent's number. "I've heard that Torino Medical Solutions occasionally employs medical students for specialized training programs." Maya felt Vincent's presence before she saw him, his attention drawn by the potential security situation near the ballroom entrance. He approached with the fluid grace of someone prepared to handle any threat, but his expression softened when he realized Maya was managing the interaction. "David," Maya said quietly, "what makes you think we have specialized training programs for medical students?" David's composure cracked slightly. "Because 6 months ago, my girlfriend Sarah started working for your patient coordination department. She went from serving tables at Rossetti's to earning enough money to support both of us while I finished medical school." Maya exchanged glances with Vincent, recognizing the connection to the waitress they had recruited during their anniversary dinner. Sarah's transformation had apparently created opportunities for other people in her circle, exactly the kind of positive impact they had hoped to achieve. "What's your specialty?" Maya asked. "Emergency medicine with a focus on trauma surgery. I've completed rotations in battlefield medicine through the VA hospital program." David's voice strengthened as he discussed his medical training. "Mrs. Torino, I know your organization handles cases that can't go through traditional emergency rooms. I want to learn how to provide that kind of care." Maya looked at David Chen's face, seeing her own desperation from 18 months earlier reflected in his expression. Young, talented, trapped by circumstances beyond his control, willing to cross moral lines to achieve something meaningful. "Vincent," Maya said, turning to her husband, "I think we should offer David a position in our emergency medicine training program." Vincent's smile was brilliant and understanding. "Dr. Torino, I believe you're developing a pattern of recruiting talented people from impossible circumstances." Maya's laugh was warm and genuine. "Mr. Torino, I believe that's exactly the kind of pattern this organization should be known for." As the reception continued around them, Maya realized that her transformation was complete but not finished. She had evolved from invisible waitress to visible queen, from someone who survived through hiding to someone who thrived through decisive action. But the most important change was her ability to create opportunities for other people trapped in circumstances similar to her own origins. 2 hours later, Maya and Vincent stood on the hotel's rooftop terrace, looking out at the Chicago skyline where their empire of legitimate medical services had grown from the seeds of calculated violence and mutual protection. Maya's wedding gown moved gently in the autumn breeze, the fabric-catching moonlight that made the diamond in her engagement ring sparkle like captured starlight. "Mrs. Torino," Vincent said, pulling Maya closer to his warmth, "how does it feel to have officially become the most dangerous woman in Chicago?" Maya leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of his presence and the knowledge that they had built something together that was worth every price they had paid. "Mr. Torino, it feels like we've just begun to discover what we can accomplish when dangerous people choose to build instead of destroy." Vincent's kiss was soft and full of promise, carrying the taste of champagne and the knowledge that they had survived everything necessary to reach this moment of perfect happiness. Below them, Chicago stretched endlessly in all directions, a city full of people who would never know that their safety had been purchased through the elimination of predators, that their access to emergency medical care had been improved through the vision of a former waitress who had learned to see possibilities where others saw only problems. Maya Centorino had become exactly who she was meant to be, not just Vincent's partner, but a force for transformation in a world that desperately needed people willing to build bridges between legitimate society and the shadows where desperate people made impossible choices. The waitress was gone. The Queen's reign had only just begun. Vincent Torino's office occupied the top floor of a renovated warehouse in Chicago's Pilsen district, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the city's industrial arteries. The space was deceptively simple: polished concrete floors, exposed brick walls, and furniture that cost more than most people's annual salaries. But the real power lay in the details: bulletproof glass, reinforced steel doors, and security systems that would make government facilities jealous. At 7 in the morning, 3 hours after Maya Chen had boarded that rain-soaked bus, Vincent sat behind a mahogany desk reviewing reports from his lieutenants. The Torino family controlled shipping routes through the Port of Chicago, labor unions in 3 industries, and had business interests that stretched from Detroit to New Orleans. Vincent had inherited an empire built on violence and intimidation, but he had transformed it into something more sophisticated, deadlier, but hidden beneath layers of legitimate commerce. Tony Marcelli knocked twice before entering, a manila folder tucked under his arm. Tony had been Vincent's childhood friend before becoming his most trusted lieutenant, a compact man with intelligent eyes and the kind of smile that made people underestimate his capacity for violence. "You wanted a background check on the waitress from last night," Tony said, settling into the leather chair across from Vincent's desk. "Maya Chen, 32 years old, born in San Francisco to Chinese immigrants." Vincent set down his espresso cup, giving Tony his full attention. "Continue." "Army medic, deployed twice to Afghanistan between 2015 and 2019. Honourable discharge with commendations for battlefield medicine and combat effectiveness." Tony opened the folder, scanning the documents. "She saved 16 lives during a forward operating base attack, working under direct fire for 3 hours straight. Purple Heart, Bronze Star with V device for valor." Vincent's eyebrows rose slightly. Combat medic explained the composure, but not the decision to walk away from military honours to serve coffee in Chicago. "Why did she leave?" "Mother diagnosed with early-onset dementia in 2018. Maya took emergency leave, then resigned her commission to care for her full-time." Tony turned a page. "Mother's in Willowbrook Memory Care now, costs $3,000 a month. Maya works double shifts at Rossetti's plus overnight shifts at Murphy's Diner on Clark Street to cover the bills." The picture became clearer. Maya Chen wasn't just a waitress with nerves of steel. She was a decorated combat veteran sacrificing her own future to care for a woman who no longer recognized her daughter's face. "Financial situation?" Vincent asked. "Desperate. 2 months behind on rent, medical bills piling up. The care facility sent 3 payment notices last month." Tony closed the folder. "Boss, what's your interest in this girl? She's civilian, no connections to any families." Vincent stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the Chicago skyline, where the morning sun was burning through the industrial haze. Last night, watching Maya treat armed robbery like an inconvenience, he had seen something that intrigued him. Now, learning about her military background and the impossible choices that had led her to Rossetti's, that intrigue was becoming something else. Fascination. "Arrange for her to lose the restaurant job," Vincent said without turning around. "Something that looks like bad luck, not our influence." Tony's expression tightened. "Vincent, you sure about this? Getting involved with civilians, especially decorated veterans, it draws attention we don't need." "She's not a civilian anymore, Tony. She stopped being a civilian the moment she stayed calm with guns in her face." Vincent returned to his desk, his green eyes cold and calculating. "A woman like that doesn't belong clearing tables for tips. She belongs somewhere her skills are appreciated." 3 hours later, Maya was stacking clean glasses behind the bar at Rossetti's when the manager, Carl Brennan, approached with the expression of a man about to deliver bad news. Carl was 63, overweight, and had been running the restaurant for 15 years with the kind of petty tyranny that comes from having limited power in a limited world. "Maya, we need to talk." Carl's voice carried the nervous edge it always held when he was about to make someone else's life more difficult. "I got a call this morning from the owner." Maya continued her work, arranging glassware with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else. "About last night?" "About you." Carl wiped his hands on his stained apron, avoiding eye contact. "The customer you talked to after the robbery, the one in the expensive suit, turns out he's connected to some dangerous people." Maya's hands didn't pause, but something cold settled in her stomach. "Connected how?" "The kind of connected that gets restaurants burned down if they're not careful." Carl's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "Maya, I got kids to feed and a mortgage to pay. I can't have employees who attract attention from the wrong crowd." The meaning was clear before he spoke the words. Maya set down the glass she was holding and turned to face him fully. "You're firing me." "I'm protecting my business, and honestly, I'm probably protecting you too." Carl's tone held genuine regret mixed with relief. "This Vincent guy, whoever he is, his interest in you isn't good news for anyone." Maya untied her apron with movements that betrayed none of the panic building in her chest. Losing Rossetti's meant losing 40% of her income, money she couldn't replace in time for next week's bills. "When?" "End of today's shift. I'll pay you through Friday, but Maya—" Carl's expression softened slightly. "Be careful. Men like that don't leave $500 tips because they liked the service." At 11:30 p.m, Maya stood outside Murphy's Diner on Clark Street, finishing the overnight shift that had become increasingly necessary as her mother's medical costs climbed. The diner was a different world from Rossetti's. Fluorescent lights that buzzed constantly, vinyl booths that had been patched with duct tape, and customers who measured their tips in coins rather than bills. The rain had returned, turning the January night bitter and unforgiving. Maya pulled her thin jacket tighter as she waited for the bus, calculating numbers in her head the way she had done every night for 3 years. Rent, utilities, medical bills, food, the mathematics of survival that never quite added up to enough. She was reaching for her phone to check the bus schedule when a black Lincoln Town car pulled to the curb beside her. The passenger window rolled down, revealing Vincent Torino's distinctive profile in the interior's warm light. "Miss Chen." His voice carried the same quiet authority she remembered from the restaurant. "You look cold." Maya approached the car cautiously, every instinct from her military training cataloguing potential threats. Vincent sat alone in the back seat, wearing a different suit but the same aura of contained power. The car itself was armour-plated, she noticed, with windows too dark and thick for civilian use. "Mr. Torino." She kept her distance from the open window. "It's late for a social call." "It's early for mine." Vincent's smile held no warmth, only calculation. "I hear you lost your day job." The statement hit Maya like a physical blow. Vincent knowing about her termination 12 hours after it happened wasn't coincidence. It was demonstration of reach and influence that extended far beyond expensive suits and generous tips. "That's an interesting way to put it," Maya said, her voice steady, despite the implications crashing through her mind. "Almost sounds like you had something to do with it." "I had everything to do with it." Vincent's honesty was more chilling than any lie could have been. "Get in the car, Maya. It's time we discussed your future." Maya stepped back from the vehicle. "I'll take the bus, thanks. The bus doesn't run this route after midnight on weekdays. Budget cuts." Vincent's tone remained conversational, but his eyes held the patience of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. "You can walk 4 miles in the rain, or you can accept a ride from someone who wants to offer you a job." Maya looked up the empty street, then at the warm interior of Vincent's car. Her apartment was indeed 4 miles away, and her thin jacket wouldn't last 20 minutes in the bitter wind cutting off Lake Michigan. More importantly, Vincent Torino had just admitted to destroying her livelihood, which meant he held power over her continued survival. She opened the car door and slid into the heated leather interior. Vincent pressed a button that raised the partition between them and his driver, creating privacy in the mobile fortress of steel and bulletproof glass. "You smell like coffee and industrial disinfectant. Occupational hazard." Maya settled into the seat, maintaining distance while studying his face in the passing streetlights. "Why did you get me fired?" "Because a woman who can remain calm while armed men threaten her life is wasting her talents clearing tables." Vincent poured amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses. "You're a combat veteran, Maya. You've saved lives under fire. You deserve better than surviving on tips from people who don't see you as human." Maya accepted the glass but didn't drink. The whiskey was probably worth more than her weekly grocery budget. "What kind of job requires destroying someone's life to make an offer?" "The kind that pays enough to keep your mother in the best memory care facility in Illinois." Vincent's words cut through Maya's defences like a scalpel finding bone. "The kind that comes with medical insurance, a clean apartment, and the knowledge that your bills will never be late again." The car turned onto Lakeshore Drive, the dark expanse of the lake stretching endlessly to the east. Maya stared out at the water, feeling the weight of 3 years' accumulated desperation pressing against her ribs. "What kind of work?" she asked quietly. "Medical consulting for my security company. My employees occasionally require discretionary health care, injuries that can't be treated in hospitals, procedures that can't go through insurance." Vincent's explanation was smooth, practiced, but Maya wasn't naive enough to miss the implications. "You mean treating gunshot wounds and knife cuts for criminals?" "I mean providing medical care for people who protect legitimate business interests in an illegitimate world." Vincent leaned forward slightly. "Maya, you've seen combat. You know that sometimes violence is the only language certain people understand. My organisation provides security consulting for clients who operate in grey areas." Maya turned to study Vincent's face. In the dim light of the car's interior, he looked younger, less intimidating, but his eyes held depths that suggested he had made choices that would haunt softer men. "Why me? There are other medics in Chicago, other people with combat experience." "Because last night you looked armed killers in the eye without flinching, because you kept working while everyone else panicked, because you understand that survival requires functioning regardless of circumstances." Vincent's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "And because you're invisible. People don't notice waitresses, Maya. They don't remember faces of women they consider beneath their attention." The car stopped outside a glass tower in River North, its lobby gleaming with the kind of wealth that insulated residents from the real Chicago beyond their doorstep. Vincent handed Maya a keycard and a manila envelope. "Apartment 2847. Furnished, utilities included, rent paid through the end of the year. The envelope contains a signing bonus, enough to bring your mother's bills current and keep you comfortable while you consider my offer." Maya held the keycard, feeling its weight like a chain around her neck. "And if I say no?" "Then you say no. The apartment is yours either way, along with the money. I don't coerce people into working for me, Maya. I simply present opportunities and let them decide whether they want to continue surviving or start living." Maya opened the envelope. The cash inside was more money than she had seen in 3 years combined. Enough to pay her mother's care for 6 months. Enough to buy herself time to find legitimate work. Enough to sleep without calculating bills in her head every night. What happens if I take the job and decide I don't like it? Vincent smiled, and this time the expression reached his eyes. "Then you quit, with a reference letter that will get you hired anywhere in the city, and enough severance pay to start over wherever you choose." Maya looked at the apartment building, then at the money in her hands, then at Vincent Torino's face. He was offering her everything she needed to survive, wrapped in the promise of work that would probably compromise every principle she had tried to maintain since leaving the army. But principles didn't pay medical bills. Integrity didn't keep her mother in the care facility that was the only thing standing between Margaret Chen and the kind of state institution that warehoused forgotten elderly patients. "I'll think about it," Maya said, pocketing the keycard. "Take your time." Vincent signalled his driver. "But Maya, understand something. This opportunity won't be available forever. In my world, hesitation is often fatal." As Maya stepped out of the car, Vincent's final words followed her into the cold Chicago night. "Call me when you're ready to stop surviving and start living." Standing in the heated lobby of her new building, Maya Chen realized that Vincent Torino hadn't just offered her a job. He had offered her a choice between the woman she had been and the woman she could become. The question was whether she was brave enough to find out which woman she really wanted to be. Maya Chen had been living in apartment 2847 for exactly 72 hours when her carefully constructed world collapsed entirely. The apartment was a testament to understated luxury: hardwood floors that gleamed under recessed lighting, furniture that managed to be both beautiful and comfortable, and windows that offered a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline. For 3 days, Maya had moved through the space like a ghost, touching nothing unnecessarily, sleeping on top of the expensive duvet rather than disturbing the perfect arrangement of pillows. She had been raised to understand that gifts this substantial always came with prices that weren't immediately apparent. At 6:15 a.m. on Thursday morning, Maya's phone rang as she stood in the granite-countered kitchen, drinking coffee that cost more per pound than she used to spend on groceries in a week. The caller ID showed Willowbrook Memory Care, and Maya's stomach dropped before she answered. "Miss Chen, this is Director Harrison from Willowbrook. I'm afraid we need to discuss your mother's situation." Maya set down her coffee cup, her hand steady despite the fear climbing her throat. "What's wrong? Is she hurt?" No, your mother is physically fine. But Miss Chen, we've been sold. Willowbrook has been acquired by Grandview Corporation, and they're implementing new policies immediately." Harrison's voice carried genuine regret. "All residents need to be current on their accounts by Friday, or they'll be transferred to state-supervised facilities." The words hit Maya like bullets. "I'm only 2 months behind. You said you could work with me on a payment plan." "Under the old management, yes. The new owners are requiring immediate compliance with all financial obligations. Miss Chen, you owe $6,800 in back payments, plus this month's fees. The total comes to $9,800. Maya closed her eyes, calculating impossible mathematics. Even with Vincent's signing bonus, even if she took his job immediately, she couldn't generate nearly $10,000 in 24 hours. What happens if she's transferred to state care? The silence that followed lasted too long. "Miss Chen, state facilities for dementia patients. They're not what your mother deserves. Shared rooms, minimal staffing, limited activities. Your mother requires specialized care for her condition." Maya understood what Harrison couldn't say directly. State facilities for dementia patients were warehouses where people went to die forgotten and alone. Margaret Chen, who had immigrated to America with nothing but hope and determination, who had raised Maya to believe that dignity mattered more than comfort, would spend her final years in a place that stripped both dignity and comfort away. "I'll figure something out," Maya said, ending the call before Harrison could offer meaningless sympathy. She was still standing in the kitchen an hour later when her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed an unknown number, but Maya recognized the voice immediately. "Miss Chen, I trust you've had time to consider my offer." Vincent Torino's voice carried the same quiet authority she remembered, but now it sounded less like opportunity and more like inevitability. "Mr. Torino, how did you get my new number?" Maya asked, though she already knew the answer. A man who could arrange for her to lose a job and gain a luxury apartment could certainly obtain an unlisted phone number. "I make it my business to stay in touch with people I'm interested in working with. Have you made a decision about the consulting position?" Maya stared out the apartment's floor-to-ceiling windows at the city spreading below her. Somewhere in that urban maze, her mother sat in a memory care facility, probably asking nurses about the daughter she couldn't quite remember, but still worried about instinctively. "I need to ask you something first," Maya said, "and I need an honest answer." "I'm listening." "Did you arrange for Willowbrook to be sold, for the new payment demands?" Vincent's pause lasted 3 heartbeats. When he spoke, his voice held neither guilt nor apology. "I arrange for you to understand the urgency of your situation, yes." The honesty was more devastating than any lie could have been. Vincent hadn't just destroyed her job. He had engineered a crisis that made his offer irresistible. Maya felt something cold and sharp settle behind her ribs. "You manipulated an elderly woman's medical care to pressure me into working for you." "I created circumstances that clarified your options." Vincent's tone remained steady. "Maya, your mother was going to face transfer eventually. Willowbrook was already struggling financially before I became involved. I simply accelerated a timeline that was already in motion." Maya gripped the phone tighter. "And if I refuse your job offer, what happens to my mother then?" "Then you find another solution to an impossible problem, and I wish you the best of luck." Vincent's words carried the weight of finality. "But Maya, understand that I'm offering you something rare in my world. A choice. Most people in your situation don't get to negotiate." Maya closed her eyes, seeing her mother's face as it had been before the dementia. Sharp, intelligent, fierce in her devotion to family. Margaret Chen had sacrificed everything to give her daughter opportunities in America. Now Maya faced a choice between honouring her mother's sacrifices and betraying them to save her mother's life. "What exactly would this consulting work involve?" Maya asked. "Medical treatment for my employees who require discretion, wound care, emergency surgery when hospitals aren't an option, maintaining medical supplies for our operations." Vincent's explanation was clinical, professional. "You'd be based out of a private clinic we maintain, full medical equipment, pharmacy access, whatever you need to do your job properly." "And the nature of the injuries I'd be treating?" "Occupational hazards in the security industry, knife wounds, gunshots, burn injuries, broken bones from altercations." Vincent paused. "Nothing you didn't see regularly during your combat deployments." Maya thought about the forward operating base in Afghanistan, where she had spent 6 months treating injuries that ranged from minor shrapnel wounds to soldiers whose bodies had been turned into abstract art by improvised explosive devices. She had learned to save lives while rockets fell around the medical tent, to perform surgery with steady hands while gunfire rattled the walls. If she could save lives in a war zone, she could save lives for Vincent Torino's organisation. The moral mathematics were different, but the technical skills were identical. "I want conditions," Maya said. Vincent's interest sharpened audibly. "I'm listening." "First, my mother's care is guaranteed regardless of what happens to me. If I get arrested, if I quit, if I die, she stays at Willowbrook with full medical coverage for the rest of her life." "Agreed." Second, I don't participate in violence. I treat injuries, I don't cause them. If someone needs killing, you find someone else. Acceptable. Anything else? Maya stared at her reflection in the apartment's windows, seeing a woman who was about to cross a line she could never uncross. I want to see the clinic before I agree to anything. I need to know that this is real medical work, not some back-alley butcher shop. Vincent's laugh held genuine amusement. Maya, I'm offering you access to better medical equipment than most hospitals. I don't cut corners on things that matter. 2 hours later, Maya sat in the passenger seat of Vincent's Lincoln as they drove through Chicago's South Side toward an address in Bridgeport. Vincent wore another expensive suit, this one navy blue with a silk tie that probably cost more than Maya's former weekly salary. He had insisted on driving himself, dismissing his usual security detail with a gesture that spoke of absolute confidence in his ability to handle any threats personally. "Tell me about your mother," Vincent said as they stopped at a red light. "What was she like before the dementia?" The question caught Maya off guard. She had expected discussions of salary and working conditions, not personal inquiries about family. "Why do you want to know?" "Because understanding what motivates someone tells me how they'll perform under pressure." Vincent's green eyes studied Maya's profile. "You're risking everything to keep her comfortable in her final years. That level of dedication suggests you don't quit when things become difficult." Maya considered deflecting, maintaining the professional distance she had cultivated during their previous interactions. But Vincent had already demonstrated that he knew more about her life than she was comfortable with. Honesty seemed like the only viable strategy. She was a force of nature, came to America with nothing, worked 3 jobs to put herself through nursing school, raised me alone after my father died. Maya's voice softened despite her intentions. "She taught me that dignity wasn't something you could buy or inherit. It was something you earned by keeping your word and helping people who couldn't help themselves." Vincent nodded slowly. "And now you're compromising everything she taught you to honour everything she sacrificed for." The observation hit Maya like a physical blow. Vincent had identified the central contradiction of her situation with surgical precision. To save her mother, she had to betray her mother's values. "Are you trying to talk me out of taking the job?" Maya asked. "I'm trying to understand who you are when your principles conflict with your survival." Vincent turned onto a street lined with warehouses and light industrial buildings. "In my experience, people reveal their true nature when they're forced to choose between what they believe and what they need." The clinic occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse, its exterior deliberately unremarkable. Vincent used a keycard to open a steel door, leading Maya into a space that took her breath away. The clinic was larger and better equipped than the field hospitals she had worked in during her deployment. Surgical suites with state-of-the-art equipment, recovery rooms with hospital-grade monitoring systems, and a pharmacy that would make trauma surgeons weep with envy. "This is where you'd work," Vincent said, watching Maya's reaction carefully. 2 other doctors on staff, both with emergency medicine backgrounds, nursing support when needed, whatever equipment or medications you require. Maya walked through the surgical suite, running her fingers along instruments that represented millions of dollars in medical technology. The setup was professional, clinical, designed for serious medical intervention rather than crude battlefield medicine. "What's the patient volume like?" she asked. "Variable. Some weeks you'll treat minor injuries, cuts, burns, broken bones. Other weeks you might perform emergency surgery to remove bullets or repair organ damage." Vincent leaned against the doorframe, his posture relaxed but his attention focused entirely on Maya. "The work is unpredictable, often high stress, always confidential." Maya stopped beside a surgical table, identical to the ones she had used in Afghanistan. "Who are the patients? Your employees?" "Employees, associates, occasionally civilians who find themselves in situations where traditional emergency rooms aren't safe." Vincent's explanation was carefully neutral. "People who need medical care but can't answer questions about how they were injured." The implications were clear without being explicitly stated. Maya would be treating people injured during criminal activities, people fleeing law enforcement, people whose presence in a hospital would trigger investigations that Vincent's organisation couldn't afford. "What's the salary?" Maya asked. $12,000 a month, plus bonuses for emergency calls, medical insurance that covers both you and your mother, housing allowance if you want to move somewhere larger. Vincent named figures that made Maya's former financial struggles seem like distant nightmares. Maya turned to face him fully. "And if I decide I don't like the work, if I want out?" "Then you give 2 weeks' notice like any other job. I provide references that will get you hired at any hospital in the country, plus severance pay sufficient to support yourself while you find new employment." Vincent's smile held no warmth, only calculation. "Maya, I don't hold people against their will, but I also don't offer second chances to people who betray my trust." The warning was delivered with the same conversational tone Vincent might use to discuss the weather, but Maya heard the steel beneath the surface. Vincent Torino was offering her a way out of desperation, but accepting meant entering a world where betrayal was met with consequences far more severe than unemployment. Maya looked around the clinic one final time, weighing everything she was about to gain against everything she was about to lose. Her mother's care secured, financial stability, work that would use her medical training in ways that mattered. In exchange, she would provide medical support to criminals. She would treat injuries inflicted during activities that probably involved violence, theft, and worse. She would become complicit in a world that operated outside the law and beyond the reach of conventional justice. But her mother would be safe. Margaret Chen would spend her final years in comfort and dignity, cared for by professionals who would treat her as a human being rather than a burden. "I'll take the job," Maya said. Vincent extended his hand, his grip firm and warm when Maya shook it. "Welcome to the organisation, Dr. Chen. You start Monday morning." As they drove back through the Chicago streets, Maya stared out at the city she had called home for 3 years. Everything looked the same, but she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. She had crossed a line that separated her old life from whatever came next. Vincent Torino had offered her a choice between survival and destruction, and Maya Chen had chosen survival. The question now was whether she could live with the price that survival demanded. But as she thought about her mother's face, about the dignity that mattered more than comfort, Maya realized that some choices weren't really choices at all. They were simply the inevitable consequences of loving someone more than you loved your own moral certainty. The woman who had cleared tables at Rossetti's was gone. The woman who would treat gunshot wounds for the Torino crime family was just beginning to understand who she might become. Maya's first week at the clinic passed in a carefully orchestrated routine designed to ease her transition from legitimate medicine to whatever Vincent Torino's organisation required. The injuries she treated were minor: a construction worker with a deep laceration who spoke no English, a security guard with a dislocated shoulder who insisted he had fallen downstairs, a deliveryman with second-degree burns who claimed a kitchen accident despite the precise pattern that suggested chemical contact. Each patient paid in cash, provided no identification, and asked no questions about Maya's credentials or the clinic's licensing. In return, Maya asked no questions about how a construction worker acquired knife wounds with defensive patterns, or why a security guard's fall had produced bruising consistent with brass knuckle impact. The willful blindness required for the job was exhausting in ways that treating combat injuries had never been. In Afghanistan, Maya had known exactly who the enemy was and why soldiers were wounded. Here, she was required to maintain professional ignorance while her medical training catalogued evidence of violence with forensic precision. On Friday afternoon, Maya was restocking surgical supplies when Tony Marcelli burst through the clinic's entrance, supporting a man whose white shirt was soaked crimson from shoulder to waist. The injured man was conscious but pale, his breathing shallow and rapid in the way that indicated significant blood loss. "Marco took one in the shoulder," Tony said, manoeuvring his burden toward the main surgical suite. "Went clean through, but he's losing blood fast." Maya was already moving, her military training overriding civilian hesitation. Marco Benedetti was Vincent's lieutenant for dock operations, a compact man in his 40s with intelligent eyes and the kind of scars that spoke of a violent profession. Maya had met him briefly during her orientation, noting the way other men deferred to his quiet authority. "Get him on the table!" Maya ordered, pulling on surgical gloves while her mind automatically catalogued the injury. "How long ago was he shot?" "Maybe 15 minutes. We were handling a territorial dispute with some idiots from the west side when things went sideways." Tony helped Maya cut away Marco's shirt, revealing an entry wound just above the collarbone. Bullet went straight through, but the exit wound is ugly. Maya examined both wounds with professional detachment. The bullet had missed the subclavian artery by inches, but had clipped the edge of Marco's lung, causing a pneumothorax that needed immediate attention. "He needs a chest tube. Tony, call Vincent and tell him Marco's going to be here for several hours. Doc, just patch him up enough to move. We can't stay here too long." Maya looked up from preparing the chest tube insertion, her dark eyes holding the same steady authority Tony had seen her display with armed robbers. "If I patch him up, Marco dies from internal bleeding within the hour. If you want him to live, you let me do my job properly." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Tony Marcelli wasn't accustomed to being given orders, especially by women, especially by newcomers to Vincent's organisation. But something in Maya's absolute certainty made him step back. "Do what you need to do," he said quietly. Maya worked with the methodical precision of someone who had performed emergency surgery under battlefield conditions. Insert chest tube, re-inflate the lung, clean and suture both wounds, start an IV to replace lost blood volume. Her hands remained perfectly steady as she worked, even when Marco's blood pressure dropped dangerously low and his pulse became thready. "Stay with me, Marco," she said as she worked. "Your lung was punctured, but I'm fixing it. You're going to be fine, but I need you to stay conscious and keep breathing." Marco's eyes found hers through the haze of blood loss and pain medication. "You're the waitress Vincent hired, Maya Chen." "I'm the Dr. Vincent hired," Maya corrected, continuing to suture the exit wound with precise, even stitches. "Though I used to be a waitress, yes. Vincent said you didn't flinch when gunmen came into your restaurant, said you kept working like nothing happened." Maya glanced at Tony, who was watching her work with the fascination of someone seeing artistry performed at the highest level. "Vincent talks too much." Marco laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at his stitches. "Vincent never talks too much. Every word he says has a purpose." His voice was getting stronger as the chest tube did its work, allowing his lung to fully inflate. "He's been watching you since you started here, making sure you're adjusting to the work." "And what's his assessment?" Maya asked, applying a pressure dressing to the entry wound. "That you're exactly what this organisation has been missing," Tony said quietly. "Someone who can function under pressure without losing their humanity." Maya paused in her work, looking at Tony with surprise. She had expected suspicion from Vincent's lieutenants, resentment at an outsider being brought into their inner circle. Instead, Tony was watching her with something approaching respect. "Most people in our world get hard fast," Marco added. "They learn to shut off the part of themselves that cares about suffering. You're treating my injuries like they matter, like I matter. That's rare." Maya resumed her work, uncomfortable with the praise but unable to deny its accuracy. She did care about her patients, regardless of how they had been injured or what they did for a living. The instinct to heal was stronger than any moral judgments about the circumstances that had required healing. "How do you do it?" Tony asked. "How do you treat people without asking questions about why they need treatment?" Maya secured the final suture and stepped back to examine her work. Marco's colour was improving, his breathing easier. The immediate crisis was over, though he would need careful monitoring for signs of infection or complications. In Afghanistan, I treated soldiers who had been wounded doing terrible things to other human beings. drone operators who had killed children, interrogators who had tortured prisoners, snipers who had executed civilians. Maya stripped off her surgical gloves, her voice matter-of-fact. My job wasn't to judge what they had done. My job was to keep them alive so they could go home to their families. Tony and Marco exchanged glances, recognizing something they hadn't expected to find in Vincent's newest employee. Maya Chen wasn't naive about the nature of violence or the complexity of moral choices in extreme circumstances. The difference, Maya continued, is that those soldiers were fighting a war someone else had declared. You're choosing this life every day. You think that makes us worse than soldiers? Marco asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Maya considered the question while she prepared Marco's post-operative medications. I think it makes you more honest. Soldiers pretend they're heroes when they're often just people who got trapped in situations they didn't create. You know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. The conversation was interrupted by Vincent's arrival. He entered the clinic with the controlled urgency of a man accustomed to crisis management, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the medical environment. His eyes went immediately to Marco, assessing his lieutenant's condition with the calculating attention of someone whose survival depended on the competence of his subordinates. How is he? Vincent asked Maya. Stable. The bullet missed his subclavian artery by about 3 millimeters, which is the difference between minor surgery and fatal hemorrhage. Maya showed Vincent the chest x-rays she had taken. He'll need to stay here overnight for observation, but he should make a full recovery. Vincent studied the x-rays with surprising medical literacy. You've done good work, Doctor. Better than the last medic we employed. What happened to your last medic? Maya asked. Vincent's expression darkened slightly. He asked too many questions about things that weren't his concern. Curiosity can be a fatal flaw in my line of work. The warning was delivered with Vincent's characteristic conversational tone, but Maya understood the implication. She was being valued for her medical expertise, but that value had limits that she crossed at her own peril. I'll keep that in mind, Maya said. Vincent moved closer to the surgical table where Marco was resting, his voice dropping to a register that only Maya could hear. You saved his life tonight. Marco has a wife and 3 daughters who will sleep safely because of your skill. Maya looked at Vincent's face, seeing something she hadn't expected in his green eyes. Genuine gratitude mixed with the calculating assessment she had grown accustomed to. For the first time since accepting his job offer, Maya realized that Vincent Torino genuinely cared about the people who worked for him. That's what you pay me for, Maya said quietly. No, that's what I hoped you would do. Vincent's hand brushed against hers as he reached for Marco's chart, the contact lasting just long enough to send electricity up Maya's arm. What I pay you for is discretion and competence. What you did tonight was above and beyond either expectation. Maya became acutely aware of Vincent's proximity, the way his expensive cologne mixed with the antiseptic smell of the clinic, the way his attention focused on her with laser intensity. The man was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his criminal activities. "Vincent!" Marco called from the surgical table, his voice stronger but still weak. "The West Side crew that shot me, they're going to try again. This was just reconnaissance to see how we'd respond." Vincent's attention shifted immediately back to business, but Maya noticed that he positioned himself slightly closer to her, as if her proximity to Marco's bedside put her in some undefined danger. "How many men?" Vincent asked. "At least 6, maybe more. They're trying to move in on our dock territory, testing our response time and security protocols." Marco struggled to sit up straighter. "They'll hit us again within 48 hours, probably during a shipment." Vincent nodded grimly. "Then we'll be ready for them. Tony, double the security details and make sure all shipments have medical support standing by." Maya realized with a cold shock that Vincent was planning to use her presence to enable more violence. Having a doctor on standby during territorial disputes meant his men could take greater risks, fight more aggressively, knowing that medical care was immediately available. I don't work in active combat situations, Maya said firmly. I treat injuries after the fact, not during firefights. Vincent turned to her with an expression that mixed surprise and something that might have been admiration. No one is asking you to work under fire, Maya, but having you available nearby ensures that injuries like Marco's don't become fatalities. The logic was sound, but Maya recognized the slippery slope she was being asked to navigate. Today, she treated Marco after he was shot during a territorial dispute. Tomorrow, she might be asked to provide battlefield medicine during active gang warfare. I need clear boundaries about what constitutes medical support versus combat participation, Maya said. Vincent smiled, the expression reaching his eyes for the first time since she had known him. I wouldn't expect anything less from someone with your background. We'll discuss operational parameters later, but for now, just focus on keeping Marco comfortable. As Vincent and Tony left to plan their response to the West Side incursion, Maya found herself alone with Marco in the quiet clinic. She checked his vital signs, adjusted his pain medication, and tried to process the realization that she had just saved the life of a man who would probably kill people in retaliation for his own injury. "Dr. Chen," Marco said softly, "thank you." Maya looked at his face, seeing not a criminal, but a man who was grateful to be alive, who would return to a wife and daughters who loved him regardless of how he earned their livelihood. "You're welcome," she said, and meant it. Outside the clinic, Chicago's night settled over the city like a blanket that concealed more than it revealed. Maya had entered Vincent Torino's world as a reluctant participant, but tonight she had discovered something unexpected. She was good at this work, and the people she treated were more complex than the simple categories of hero and villain she had expected. The question now was whether she could maintain her moral boundaries while providing medical care to people who lived entirely outside moral boundaries, whether she could save lives without becoming complicit in the deaths that would inevitably follow. As Marco slept peacefully under her care, Maya realized that those questions might not have answers that would let her sleep as easily. The poker game was held in the private dining room of Torino's, an upscale Italian restaurant in River North that Vincent owned through a labyrinth of shell companies and legitimate business fronts. Maya had never seen the establishment during its regular dinner service, but tonight it had been transformed into something that resembled a scene from a movie about organised crime. Mahogany panelling, crystal chandeliers, and enough armed security to invade a small country. Vincent had insisted Maya accompany him as his personal physician, a role that apparently required her to sit silently in an antique leather chair, while Chicago's most powerful crime bosses played cards for stakes that exceeded most people's annual salaries. She wore a black cocktail dress that Vincent had selected personally, claiming that her presence needed to suggest wealth and sophistication rather than military competence. The dress was beautiful, expensive, and made Maya feel like she was wearing a costume for a role she hadn't auditioned for. "Ante is 50,000, announced Salvatore Benedetto, the elderly patriarch of Chicago's second most powerful crime family. His weathered hands moved cards with the practiced ease of someone who had been gambling professionally since before Maya was born. "Vincent, your lovely companion brings a certain elegance to our usual gathering." Vincent smiled without warmth, his attention divided between his cards and the subtle power dynamics playing out around the table. "Dr. Chen is here in case anyone requires medical attention. High-stakes poker can be stressful on the cardiovascular system." Laughter rippled around the table, but Maya noticed the way Vincent's comment established her credentials while reinforcing her non-threatening status. She was a doctor, not a threat. A beautiful accessory, not a strategic asset. The misdirection was masterful and completely deliberate. Tommy Castellano, heir apparent to the family that controlled Chicago's South Side drug trade, leaned back in his chair with the arrogance of a man who had inherited power rather than earned it. "Vincent, you always did like your women smart. Too bad intelligence doesn't help much when things get physical." The temperature in the room dropped perceptibly. Maya saw Vincent's hand tighten almost imperceptibly around his whiskey glass, saw the way Tony Marcelli's posture shifted slightly in his position near the wall. Castellano had just insulted both Maya and Vincent in a way that couldn't be ignored. Vincent set down his glass with deliberate care. "Tommy, that's an interesting observation coming from someone whose family's recent territorial disputes have required so much medical attention. Perhaps you should be more concerned with protecting your own people than commenting on mine." The verbal thrust was surgical in its precision. Maya realized Vincent was referring to the West Side crew that had shot Marco, implying that Castellano's organization was responsible for the attack. Around the table, other players watched the exchange with the fascination of spectators at a gladiatorial contest. Castellano's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "That's a serious accusation, Vincent." "It's a serious concern," Vincent replied mildly, returning his attention to his cards. "Dr. Chen has been treating unusual numbers of gunshot wounds lately, all with ballistics consistent with weapons favoured by your soldiers." Maya felt her heart rate spike as she realised the poker game was actually an interrogation disguised as social gathering. Vincent was using her medical observations to build a case against the Castellano family, turning her patient care notes into intelligence reports. The hand continued in tense silence, but Maya could see the calculation in Vincent's green eyes as he studied Castellano's reactions. When Vincent won the hand with a full house, his smile held predatory satisfaction that had nothing to do with the $200,000 in chips he pulled across the table. "Gentlemen, I believe this concludes our evening," Vincent announced, standing with fluid grace. "Dr. Chen, if you're ready." As they prepared to leave, Castellano made his final mistake of the evening. "Vincent, your doctor is lovely, but she seems a little delicate for the kind of work your organization requires. Maybe she should stick to treating paper cuts and headaches." The insult hung in the air like smoke from a discharged gun. Maya saw Vincent's expression shift from diplomatic courtesy to something cold and dangerous, saw Tony's hand move automatically toward the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. But before Vincent could respond, Maya stood and walked directly to Castellano's chair. Her movement was calm, purposeful, drawing every eye in the room. She stopped just behind his seat, close enough that he would have to crane his neck uncomfortably to maintain eye contact. "Mr. Castellano," Maya said, her voice carrying the same professional authority she had used with Marco during emergency surgery. "Based on your flushed complexion, elevated respiratory rate, and the slight tremor in your hands when you drink, I'd estimate your blood pressure is running about 180 over 110. Combined with your family history of cardiovascular disease and your obvious stress response to confrontation, I'd say you're at serious risk of stroke or cardiac arrest within the next 5 years." Castellano's face went from red to pale in the span of a heartbeat. Every medical detail Maya had cited was visible to anyone with training to recognize the symptoms, but delivering the assessment as a casual observation required the kind of clinical detachment that made it sound like a threat. "Maybe you should focus on protecting your own health before commenting on other people's medical needs," Maya continued, returning to Vincent's side with the same calm precision she had used during Marco's surgery. The room fell silent, except for the soft ticking of an antique grandfather clock. Maya had just publicly diagnosed a crime boss with potentially fatal health problems, while making clear that she possessed the medical knowledge to recognize vulnerability that other people missed. Vincent's smile was brilliant and genuinely admiring. "Gentlemen, I believe Dr. Chen has made her position quite clear. Good evening." As they walked to Vincent's car, Maya could feel adrenaline coursing through her system in the aftermath of confrontation. She had just faced down one of Chicago's most powerful criminals using nothing but medical knowledge and absolute composure. "That," Vincent said as he held the car door open for her, "was the most magnificent thing I've ever seen." Maya slid into the leather seat, her hands shaking slightly now that the immediate threat was over. "I probably shouldn't have done that. He insulted you, and by extension he insulted me. I couldn't let it stand." Vincent settled beside her. his proximity in the car's intimate interior sending familiar electricity through Maya's nervous system. "Maya, you just demonstrated why I wanted you in this organization. Not just for your medical skills, but for your ability to see people's weaknesses and respond accordingly." The driver raised the partition, creating privacy in the mobile sanctuary of armoured steel and bulletproof glass. Vincent poured 2 glasses of wine from the car's bar, handing one to Maya with fingers that brushed against hers deliberately. "You defended me," Vincent said quietly. "In a room full of dangerous men, you stood up for me without being asked." Maya met his gaze, seeing something in his green eyes that she hadn't noticed before: vulnerability. Despite his power and influence, Vincent Torino was a man who spent his life surrounded by people who would betray him for the right price. Finding someone willing to defend him publicly was apparently a rare experience. "You've done the same for me," Maya said, "when you offered me this job, when you insisted on terms that protected my mother, when you made clear that I was under your protection." Vincent set down his wineglass and turned to face her fully. "Maya, I need to tell you something that I probably should have mentioned before you accepted this position." The words sent ice through Maya's veins. "What?" "The poker game tonight wasn't just about cards or even territorial disputes. It was about you." Vincent's voice carried uncharacteristic uncertainty. "Word has gotten out that I've hired a combat medic, someone with military training and medical expertise. Other families are wondering whether you represent a new strategic asset for my organization." Maya processed the implications with growing alarm. "You're saying that my presence makes you a bigger threat to other crime families." "I'm saying that your presence makes my organization more resilient, which other families recognize as a shift in the balance of power." Vincent's hand found hers in the space between their seats. "Maya, I hired you because I needed a medic, but keeping you safe has become more complicated than I anticipated." The contact between their hands generated heat that Maya could feel radiating up her arm. Vincent's admission that she had become a strategic asset rather than just an employee changed everything about her position in his world. "How complicated?" Maya asked. Vincent's thumb traced across her knuckles with feather-light pressure. "Complicated enough that Tommy Castellano's insults tonight weren't random rudeness. They were testing how I would respond to threats against someone I care about." The words "someone I care about" hung between them with the weight of a confession that Vincent might not have intended to make. Maya studied his face, seeing past the careful control to something raw and honest beneath. "And how did you respond?" Maya asked quietly. "By letting you handle it yourself, which was either the smartest thing I've ever done or the most dangerous." Vincent's smile held self-deprecating humour. "I'm still deciding which." Maya turned her hand palm up, interlacing her fingers with Vincent's in a gesture that felt both natural and revolutionary. "For what it's worth, I think it was smart. Castellano expected you to protect me like a possession. Instead, you let me demonstrate that I can protect myself." Vincent's grip tightened almost imperceptibly. "Maya, there's something else you should know about tonight, about why Castellano was really testing us." "I'm listening." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes holding hers with an intensity that made Maya's breathing irregular. "I've been in this business for 15 years. I've seen men killed for falling in love with the wrong women, seen entire organizations destroyed because someone's emotions compromised their judgment." Maya felt her heart skip a beat. "Vincent?" "But watching you tonight, seeing you stand up to Castellano with nothing but medical knowledge and absolute composure, I realise something that terrifies me." Vincent's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I'm falling in love with you, Maya, and in my world that makes you the most dangerous person I've ever known." The confession hit Maya like a physical blow. She had felt the electricity between them, had noticed the way Vincent looked at her with something beyond professional appreciation. But hearing him admit to emotions that could get them both killed made everything real in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Vincent, Maya started to speak, but he placed a finger gently against her lips. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to understand why tonight's poker game was important, why other families are watching you so carefully." Vincent's hand moved to cup her cheek with surprising tenderness. "You're not just my employee anymore, Maya. You're my weakness, and in my world, weaknesses get people killed." Maya leaned into his touch, feeling the warmth of his palm against her skin. "Then maybe we need to make sure I'm not a weakness. Maybe we need to make sure I'm a strength." Vincent's smile was brilliant and genuinely happy for the first time since Maya had known him. "Dr. Maya Chen, you are the most dangerous woman I've ever met." The car pulled up to Maya's apartment building, but neither of them moved toward the door. Instead, Vincent leaned closer, his face inches from hers, close enough that Maya could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. "Tomorrow, we start preparing for whatever Castellano is planning in retaliation for tonight," Vincent said. "But tonight, I just want to remember what it felt like when you defended me in that room." Maya felt herself leaning closer, drawn by gravity and desire, and the knowledge that kissing Vincent Torino would change everything about her life in ways she couldn't predict or control. "Vincent," she whispered, "yes? Next time someone insults me in a room full of dangerous men, I'm going to do more than diagnose their health problems." Vincent's laughter was rich and genuine. "Maya Chen, I can't wait to see what that looks like." As Maya walked to her apartment building, she could feel Vincent watching her from the car. The evening had changed something fundamental between them, shifted their relationship from professional to personal in ways that would have consequences she couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time since accepting Vincent's job offer, Maya felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Maya's hands were steady as she sutured the knife wound across Vincent's knuckles, but her mind was racing with the implications of what she had overheard 3 hours earlier. The injury was minor, defensive cuts from disarming an attacker during a confrontation at one of the family's legitimate businesses. But it provided cover for the conversation she needed to have without raising Tony Marcelli's suspicions. "Tell me about Wednesday's shipment," Maya said quietly as she worked, her voice pitched low enough that only Vincent could hear. They were alone in the clinic's main treatment room, Tony having left to coordinate security for the weekly dockside operations. Vincent's green eyes sharpened with interest. "What about it?" "The meeting location. How well do you know the warehouse?" Maya finished the final suture and began applying antibiotic ointment with precise movements. "Have you verified the security arrangements personally?" "Maya, what's this about?" Vincent's voice carried the edge of suspicion that came from 15 years of survival in a business where paranoia was a necessity. "You're asking questions about operational details that aren't your concern." Maya set down her instruments and met his gaze directly. "Because I'm worried about you, because the conversation I overheard this morning suggested that Wednesday's meeting might not be as routine as everyone assumes." Vincent went very still. In the 18 days since Maya had joined his organisation, she had learned to recognise the subtle signs that indicated when he was transitioning from Vincent Torino, the man, to Vincent Torino, the crime boss. The relaxed posture disappeared, replaced by the coiled alertness of someone perpetually prepared for betrayal. "What conversation?" Vincent asked. Maya hesitated, knowing that her next words would either save Vincent's life or destroy her position in his organisation. "Tony was on the phone this morning when I arrived early to restock medical supplies. He was discussing timing with someone, talking about when you would be most vulnerable and how the Wednesday window was their best opportunity." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Vincent's expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, calculation, and something that might have been disappointment. Maya realised he was processing not just her words, but her decision to share intelligence about his most trusted lieutenant. "You're certain about what you heard?" Vincent's voice was deadly quiet. "Certain enough to risk everything by telling you?" Maya's hands began cleaning the medical instruments with mechanical precision, a nervous habit she had developed during combat deployments. Vincent, I could be wrong. Tony might have been discussing something completely unrelated, but the timing, the language he used, it sounded like operational planning. Vincent stood and walked to the clinic's reinforced windows, staring out at the Chicago skyline where late afternoon shadows were beginning to stretch across the industrial landscape. Maya watched the tension build in his shoulders, saw the way his hands clenched and unclenched as he processed the possibility that his childhood friend might be planning to betray him. "The warehouse meeting is scheduled for 8 p.m. Wednesday," Vincent said without turning around. "It's supposed to be a routine handoff with our suppliers from Detroit, 12 men, including Tony and myself, in a location we've used successfully for 3 years. Maya joined him at the window, standing close enough to offer support without crowding his space. "What kind of security protocols do you normally use?" "Standard perimeter watch, 2 escape routes, communications equipment tested beforehand." Vincent's reflection in the glass showed a man aging years in the span of minutes. "Tony handles all the advanced planning. He selects the security positions, coordinates with our contacts, manages the logistics." The implications were clear without being spoken. If Tony was planning betrayal, he would have had weeks to position assets, compromise security, and arrange circumstances that would leave Vincent exposed to attack. Maya felt cold dread settling in her stomach as she realized the scope of potential danger. "Vincent, you can't go to that meeting," Maya said firmly. "If I don't go, it looks like I don't trust my own organization. It shows weakness that other families will exploit." Vincent turned to face her, his green eyes holding the kind of resolve that had kept him alive in a profession where trust was often fatal. "Maya, I can't run my business based on overheard phone conversations and paranoid suspicions." Maya stepped closer, close enough that she could see the conflict warring in his expression. "Then let me come with you. Not as medical support, but as additional security. Someone Tony doesn't know about, someone who can watch for threats he might miss." Vincent's laugh held no humour. "Absolutely not. If there is a trap, if Tony is planning something, the last place I want you is in the middle of a potential firefight. Vincent, I'm not some civilian you need to protect. I'm a combat veteran who spent 18 months treating casualties in active war zones." Maya's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to functioning under extreme pressure. "If Wednesday is a trap, you need someone there who can watch your back while maintaining the appearance of normal routine." Vincent studied her face with the intensity of a man whose survival had always depended on reading people accurately. "Maya, if I'm wrong about Tony, if Wednesday goes according to plan, your presence changes nothing. But if you're right, if Tony is planning betrayal, then you being there puts you in mortal danger." Maya reached for Vincent's bandaged hand, interlacing their fingers with the familiarity that had developed over their weeks of forced proximity. "And if you're killed because I withheld information that could have saved your life, then I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I could have prevented it." The contact between them generated the familiar electricity that Maya had learned to associate with Vincent's presence. But beneath the physical attraction was something deeper, genuine fear for his safety that transcended professional concern or personal attraction. "There's something else," Maya said quietly. "When I overheard Tony's conversation, he mentioned that the operation needed to look like retaliation from an outside family. He specifically referenced the Castellanos." Vincent's expression darkened further. "Which means if Tony is planning betrayal, he's coordinating with Tommy Castellano. The insults at the poker game weren't random provocation. They were psychological preparation for whatever comes next." Maya nodded grimly. "If Tony kills you during a meeting that's supposed to be routine business, and if he can make it look like Castellano retaliation for the poker game confrontation, then he eliminates you while positioning himself to take control of your organization." The analysis was clinical, logical, and terrifying in its implications. Vincent had spent 15 years building an empire based on loyalty and personal relationships. If Tony Marcelli was planning to destroy that empire through betrayal, then everything Vincent had worked for was at risk. "There's one way to test your theory," Vincent said slowly. "I can change the meeting location at the last minute, claim security concerns or intelligence about police surveillance. If Tony objects or seems resistant to the change, it confirms he's invested in the original location for reasons beyond simple logistics." Maya felt a spark of hope. And if he doesn't object? Then either you misheard his conversation or he's skilled enough to adapt his plans on short notice. Vincent's smile held no warmth. Either way, we'll learn something valuable about his intentions. Maya began putting away the medical supplies, her mind already working through tactical possibilities. If you change the location, make sure it's somewhere that offers you multiple escape routes and clear sight lines, somewhere Tony can't position assets in advance. Vincent watched her work with growing admiration. "Maya, you're thinking like a soldier again." "I never stopped thinking like a soldier. I just learned to think like a doctor too." Maya sealed the last supply container and turned to face him fully. "Vincent, promise me that if Wednesday goes wrong, if Tony reveals himself as a threat, you won't hesitate to protect yourself." Vincent moved closer, close enough that Maya could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, close enough that his cologne mixed with the antiseptic smell of the clinic to create a scent she was beginning to associate with safety. "Maya, if Wednesday goes wrong, I need you to promise me something too." Vincent's hand cupped her cheek with the tenderness he showed only when they were alone. "Promise me you'll stay as far away from the violence as possible. Promise me you'll prioritize your own survival over mine." Maya leaned into his touch, feeling the warmth of his palm against her skin. "I can't promise that." "Maya?" "Vincent, 18 days ago, you offered me a choice between surviving and living. You've spent every day since then showing me what living actually looks like." Maya's voice carried absolute conviction. "I'm not going to go back to just surviving because things get dangerous. We're in this together now." Vincent's smile was brilliant and heartbreaking. "Dr. Maya Chen, you're going to be the death of me." "No," Maya said firmly. "I'm going to be the reason you stay alive." As they prepared to leave the clinic, Maya felt the weight of Wednesday approaching, like a storm front moving across Lake Michigan. In 48 hours, Vincent would walk into a situation that might be routine business or elaborate trap. Tony Marcelli would either prove his loyalty or reveal his betrayal, and Maya would discover whether her feelings for Vincent Torino were strong enough to risk everything she had fought to protect. The late afternoon sunlight streaming through the clinic's windows cast long shadows across the floor, creating patterns of light and darkness that seemed to mirror the uncertainty of their situation. Maya looked at Vincent's profile as he set the clinic's security system, memorizing the details of his face in case Wednesday took him away from her permanently. Tomorrow they would finalize preparations for a meeting that could destroy everything they had built together. Tonight they still had the illusion of safety and the precious knowledge that they had chosen to trust each other completely. In Vincent Torino's world, that trust might be the most dangerous thing of all, but it was also the only thing that gave either of them hope for surviving what came next. The warehouse in Pilsen looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, a routine meeting location for routine business between legitimate security consultants and their Detroit suppliers. Maya crouched behind a shipping container 60 yards from the main entrance, watching Vincent's men take their assigned positions through military-grade night vision binoculars that Tony had somehow failed to include in his equipment manifest. Vincent had changed the meeting location at the last minute, citing intelligence about increased police activity in their usual warehouse district. Tony's reaction had been telling. 3 seconds of visible frustration before professional acceptance, just long enough to confirm Maya's worst suspicions about his intentions. Now, at 7:45 p.m. on Wednesday evening, Maya watched Tony position Vincent's security team with the precision of someone who had planned this moment for weeks. The men moved to cover points that offered excellent protection against external threats, but created perfect kill zones if the threat came from within their own ranks. Maya keyed her radio, using the encrypted frequency Vincent had given her for emergencies. Overwatch to Control, I count 8 hostiles in concealed positions around the perimeter, not your people. Vincent's voice came back steady and controlled. Confirmed. How many of my men? 6 visible, plus you and Tony. Control. The external hostiles have line of sight on all your people's positions except the northwest corner where Marco is stationed. Maya adjusted her scope, scanning for additional threats. Tony positioned everyone perfectly for an ambush. Through her binoculars, Maya could see Vincent inside the warehouse's main office, reviewing shipping manifests with their supposed Detroit suppliers, 3 men in expensive suits who moved with the fluid grace of professional killers. Tony stood near the office's rear exit, his hand resting casually on the radio that would coordinate the attack. Or Control, you need to abort. This is a kill box. Negative, Overwatch. Moving to abort position would trigger the trap prematurely. I need confirmation of hostile intent before engaging. Maya cursed under her breath. Vincent was right. Leaving without proof of betrayal would make him appear paranoid and weak to his own organisation. But staying meant giving Tony time to spring a trap that would kill everyone loyal to the Torino family. At exactly 8 p.m, Maya watched Tony raise his radio with deliberate casualness. All units, we have movement on the east approach, possible police surveillance. The lie was smooth, professional, and completely believable to anyone who didn't know it was the signal for massacre. Through her scope, Maya saw muzzle flashes erupt from concealed positions as Castellano gunmen opened fire on Vincent's unsuspecting security team. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Vincent's men, caught in crossfire from positions they hadn't known existed, returned fire while seeking cover that Tony had systematically eliminated during his advanced planning. Maya watched Marco take 2 rounds to the chest before dropping behind inadequate concealment near the loading dock. "All units down! All units down!" Tony's voice carried perfectly simulated panic over the radio. "We're under attack from multiple positions." Maya was already moving, her military training overriding civilian hesitation. She sprinted toward the warehouse's northwest entrance, the route she had scouted during her advance reconnaissance that Tony couldn't have predicted because he didn't know she was here. Inside the warehouse, Vincent had drawn his Sig Sauer P229 and was returning fire against the 3 suppliers who had revealed themselves as Castellano assassins. One gunman was down, his expensive suit soaked crimson, but Vincent was pinned behind a desk that wouldn't stop rifle rounds much longer. Maya burst through the northwest door, her own weapon, a Glock 19 she had acquired through military contacts, already drawn and ready. She had a clear angle on the office where Vincent was trapped, but Tony stood between her and a clean shot at his attackers. "Tony!" Maya shouted over the gunfire. "Vincent needs medical evacuation. Where's your extraction plan?" Tony spun toward her voice, his expression shifting from feigned panic to genuine shock. Maya Chen was supposed to be safely distant from the ambush, not armed and moving with tactical precision through a battlefield. "Maya, what are you doing here?" Tony's hand moved toward his sidearm, the movement subtle but unmistakable to someone with combat experience. Maya didn't hesitate. The Glock's report was sharp and final in the warehouse's concrete interior. Tony Marcelli dropped to the floor with a bullet through his centre mass, his radio clattering across the concrete as he fell. Through the office windows, Maya saw Vincent's position being overrun. The 2 remaining assassins had flanked his cover while he was distracted by the external gunfire. Vincent was bleeding from a shoulder wound, his return fire becoming sporadic as blood loss affected his accuracy. Maya moved through the warehouse with the fluid efficiency of someone who had cleared buildings under fire in Afghanistan. She put 2 rounds into the first assassin before he realized the threat had changed direction. watched him fall backward over a stack of shipping crates with the liquid grace of sudden death. The final assassin turned toward Maya's position, his rifle swinging in a deadly arc that would have cut her down if Vincent hadn't chosen that moment to empty his magazine into the man's torso. The gunman dropped like a marionette with severed strings, his weapon discharging harmlessly into the warehouse ceiling. Sudden silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the metallic pinging of cooling weapons and Vincent's laboured breathing. Maya kept her pistol ready as she approached the office, scanning for additional threats until she was certain the immediate danger had passed. Vincent was leaning against the bullet-riddled desk, his left shoulder bleeding heavily, but his green eyes alert and focused. "Maya, how bad is the damage to my people?" Maya was already moving to assess his wound, her medical training seamlessly replacing her combat mindset. "I counted 3 of your men down during the initial attack. Marco took chest wounds but was still moving when I entered the building. I need to check on him before treating your shoulder." "Maya." Vincent's voice stopped her movement toward the door. "Tony?" Maya met his gaze directly, seeing pain that had nothing to do with gunshot wounds. "Dead. He was drawing on me when I shot him." Vincent closed his eyes for a long moment, processing the death of his childhood friend and closest confidant. When he opened them again, they held the cold calculation of a man who had survived by accepting harsh realities without sentimentality. "The radio signal," Vincent said. "You heard him coordinate the attack." "All units, we have movement on the east approach. Textbook ambush signal." Maya began examining Vincent's shoulder wound, noting that the bullet had passed through muscle without hitting bone or major blood vessels. "Vincent, he positioned your people perfectly for slaughter. Every security point was a kill zone." Vincent winced as Maya probed the wound's edges. "How long have you suspected?" "Since I overheard his phone conversation yesterday morning, but suspecting and knowing are different things." Maya began applying pressure to control bleeding. "I'm sorry it had to be me who killed him." Vincent's hand covered hers, his grip strong despite the blood loss. "Maya, if you hadn't killed him, he would have killed both of us. Tony chose his side the moment he made that phone call." Through the warehouse's shattered windows, Maya could hear sirens approaching, police and emergency services responding to reports of automatic weapons fire in an industrial district. Vincent's organisation had protocols for handling law enforcement attention, but the scale of tonight's violence would require careful management. "We need to move," Maya said, helping Vincent to his feet. "Police response time to this area is usually 8 to 10 minutes. We've got maybe 3 minutes before this place is surrounded." Vincent nodded grimly. "The clean-up crew will handle the scene. Bodies disappear, evidence gets sanitized, witnesses develop selective memory problems." He looked at Tony's body with expression that mixed grief and betrayal. "But tonight changes everything about how this organisation operates." Maya supported Vincent as they moved toward the warehouse's rear exit, stepping carefully around the casualties of Tony's failed coup attempt. The 3 Castellano assassins would never report back to Tommy Castellano, but their deaths would trigger retaliation that could spiral into all-out war between the families. "Vincent," Maya said as they reached the exit, "what happens now? To us, I mean." Vincent paused in the doorway, looking back at the warehouse where his trusted lieutenant had tried to kill him and where Maya Chen had saved his life by becoming something she had never intended to be, his partner in violence. "Now we find out whether the woman who was brave enough to kill for me is brave enough to rule beside me." Vincent's smile was brilliant and predatory. "Maya, you just eliminated the last person in my organisation who questioned your place at my side." As they disappeared into the Chicago night, leaving the warehouse to burn behind them, Maya realised that Tony Marcelli's betrayal had accomplished something he never intended. Instead of destroying Vincent's empire, he had forged it into something stronger. Something that included a former army medic who had learned that sometimes saving lives required taking them first. The sirens grew louder as they reached Vincent's armoured car, but Maya felt no fear. For the first time since joining Vincent's organisation, she knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of protecting. The waitress was dead. The Queen was just beginning to understand her power. The safe house in Chinatown occupied the third floor of a building that Vincent owned through a network of shell companies designed to obscure ownership from both law enforcement and rival families. Maya had never seen the apartment before tonight, but it had clearly been prepared for exactly this kind of emergency: medical supplies, communications equipment, and enough weapons to withstand a siege. Vincent sat on the edge of a leather sofa while Maya worked on his shoulder wound, her hands steady, despite everything they had done in the past 3 hours. She had already removed the bullet, cleaned and sutured the entry and exit wounds, and started an IV to replace the blood he had lost during the firefight. "Tell me about Afghanistan," Vincent said quietly as Maya adjusted the IV drip. His voice carried exhaustion that went beyond physical pain, the bone-deep weariness of a man who had just learned that his closest friend had tried to kill him. Maya looked up from checking his pulse, surprised by the request. "Why?" "Because an hour ago you killed 3 people to save my life, and you're treating my injuries like it's routine medical procedure." Vincent's green eyes studied her face with the intensity she had learned to associate with his attempts to understand her motivations. "I want to know how someone develops that kind of compartmentalization." Maya resumed her work, using the familiar routine of medical care to process her own emotional aftermath of violence. "In Afghanistan, I learned to separate what needed to be done from how I felt about doing it. Soldiers would come into the medical tent with injuries that required immediate surgery, and I couldn't afford to think about whether they were good people or whether they deserved what had happened to them. And tonight," Maya met his gaze directly, "tonight, Tony was going to kill you. Everything else was secondary to preventing that outcome." Vincent reached for her hand with his uninjured arm, interlacing their fingers with the deliberate intimacy that had become natural between them. "Maya, do you understand what you've done, what it means in my world when someone kills to protect you?" "I know it means I've crossed a line I can never uncross." Maya's voice carried steady acceptance rather than regret. "I know it means I'm complicit in your world in ways that go beyond medical treatment." "It means you've chosen me over everything else," Vincent said quietly. "It means you've prioritized my survival over your own moral certainty." Maya considered his words while monitoring his vital signs, noting that his pulse was strong despite the blood loss. "Vincent, when I watched Tony draw his weapon, when I realized he was going to kill you, I didn't think about moral certainty or consequences. I just knew that I couldn't let you die." Vincent's smile was brilliant and heartbreaking. "Maya Chen, I think I fell in love with you the moment you stayed calm during that restaurant robbery. But tonight, watching you move through that warehouse like you were born for combat, I realize something that terrifies me." "What?" "I don't just love you. I need you, and in my business, needing someone is the most dangerous thing you can do." Vincent's thumb traced across her knuckles with feather-light pressure. "Maya, you've become essential to my survival in ways that go far beyond medical care." Maya felt her heart skip a beat at the confession. Over the past month, she had watched Vincent Torino transform from a dangerous stranger offering impossible choices to someone whose presence had become the foundation of her daily existence. Hearing him admit to similar dependence was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Vincent, I need to tell you something too," Maya said, setting down her medical instruments to focus entirely on his face. "When I took this job, I thought I was just buying time to figure out a better solution to my mother's care. I thought I could work for you without becoming personally invested. And now? Now I know that's not possible. You can't save someone's life repeatedly without caring whether they survive. You can't see someone's vulnerability and strength in equal measure without falling in love with both." Maya's voice carried the same steady conviction she had used when treating his gunshot wounds. "Vincent, I love you, and that scares me more than anything I faced in Afghanistan." Vincent's expression shifted through surprise, gratitude, and something that might have been relief. Why does it scare you? Because loving you means accepting that violence will always be part of our lives. Because it means my mother's safety depends on my willingness to do terrible things to protect you. Maya's hand tightened in his grip. Because it means I've become someone my mother wouldn't recognize, someone who kills people and feels no guilt about it. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, processing the complexity of Maya's emotional state with the careful attention he brought to all strategic decisions. When he spoke, his voice carried understanding that came from personal experience with moral transformation. Maya, 6 months ago, you were a waitress whose biggest concern was making rent on time. Tonight you eliminated 3 threats to my life with tactical precision that would impress military professionals. Vincent's free hand cupped her cheek with surprising tenderness. You've become someone your mother wouldn't recognize because you've become someone who can protect the people you love. Maya leaned into his touch, feeling the warmth of his palm against her skin. Is that how you justify it? The violence, the moral compromises? I don't justify it. I accept it as the price of living in a world where hesitation gets people killed. Vincent's green eyes held depths that suggested he had wrestled with similar questions for years. Maya, in my experience, good people don't choose violence because they enjoy it. They choose violence because it's the only language that stops bad people from hurting innocent people. Maya understood what Vincent wasn't saying directly, that Tony Marcelli's betrayal had been motivated by greed and ambition, not principles or survival. That the Castellano family's attempt to eliminate Vincent was about power and territory, not justice or protection. What happens now? Maya asked. Tommy Castellano will retaliate for tonight. This won't end with the warehouse. Vincent's expression hardened into the cold calculation she had learned to associate with his strategic planning. Tommy Castellano just learned that his alliance with Tony failed catastrophically. 3 of his best assassins are dead, and his main asset inside my organisation has been eliminated. Which means he'll either escalate to open warfare or attempt to negotiate a settlement before this. Spirals beyond his control. Vincent's smile held predatory satisfaction. Either way, he now knows that attacking me means dealing with you. And after tonight, that's not a prospect that will appeal to anyone with survival instincts. Maya realised that Vincent was right. Her presence had fundamentally changed the tactical equation of his conflicts with other crime families. She wasn't just a medic anymore. She was a strategic asset capable of independent action. Vincent, what does this make me in your organisation? Officially, I mean. Vincent's smile became genuine and warm. Officially, you're my personal physician and security consultant. Unofficially, you're my partner in every sense that matters. The word partner hung between them with the weight of transformation. Maya had entered Vincent's world as a desperate woman accepting employment from a dangerous man. Now she was being offered something approaching equality in an empire built on violence and controlled through fear. Partners, Maya repeated, testing the word. What does that look like practically? It looks like you having input on strategic decisions that affect both our survival. It looks like other families knowing that threatening me means threatening you, and vice versa. Vincent's grip on her hand tightened almost imperceptibly. It looks like us building something together that's stronger than either of us could maintain alone. Maya studied Vincent's face, seeing past the careful control to something raw and hopeful beneath. Vincent Torino had spent 15 years building an empire in isolation, surrounded by subordinates and allies, but never true equals. Offering partnership meant sharing power in ways that could either strengthen his position or destroy it completely. I accept, Maya said simply. Vincent's laugh was rich and genuine. Dr. Maya Chen, you didn't even ask what the terms and conditions include. The terms and conditions are that we protect each other, that we make decisions together, and that we build something worth the prices we've paid to get here. Maya leaned closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in Vincent's green eyes. Everything else is negotiable. Vincent's hand moved to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair with gentle pressure that drew her closer. "Maya, are you sure about this? Once we cross this line, there's no going back to who we were before tonight." "Vincent, I've killed 3 people in the past 3 hours to keep you alive. I think we've already crossed every line that matters." Maya's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "The only question now is whether we're brave enough to build something beautiful on the foundation of what we've survived together." Vincent's kiss was gentle and desperate in equal measure, carrying months of accumulated tension and the knowledge that they had chosen each other over every other consideration. Maya felt herself melting into the contact, her body responding to the warmth and safety of his embrace, despite everything they had endured. When they broke apart, both breathing heavily, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "Maya Chen, you are the most dangerous and most essential person in my life." "Vincent Torino, you are the reason I discovered who I was meant to become." Maya's smile held warmth and determination in equal measure. "Now let's figure out how to keep each other alive long enough to enjoy it." Outside the safe house windows, Chicago's night settled over the city with deceptive calm. Somewhere in the urban maze, Tommy Castellano was discovering that his coup attempt had failed catastrophically. Police were processing a warehouse crime scene that would yield no useful evidence. And in Chinatown, 2 people who had found each other across impossible circumstances were discovering that love could bloom even in soil watered with blood and betrayal. The woman who had once cleared tables for tips was gone forever. In her place was someone who could kill to protect what mattered most, someone who had chosen partnership over survival and love over moral certainty. Maya Chen had become exactly who Vincent Torino needed her to be. The question now was whether the world would survive the consequences of their partnership. 3 weeks after the warehouse massacre, Maya Chen stood in Vincent's private office coordinating the systematic dismantling of Tommy Castellano's criminal empire with the precision of a surgeon removing cancer. The wall-mounted monitors displayed surveillance footage from 4 different operations occurring simultaneously across Chicago, each one designed to eliminate Castellano assets while gathering intelligence about his remaining allies. Maya had traded her medical scrubs for tactical clothing and body armour, her appearance transformed from reluctant employee to Vincent's equal partner in both strategy and execution. The Glock 19 holstered at her hip was no longer an emergency backup. It was standard equipment for someone who had become one of the most dangerous people in Chicago's underworld. "Team Alpha has secured the West Side warehouse," Marco reported from his position at the communications console. He had recovered from his chest wounds with minimal complications thanks to Maya's emergency surgery, and now served as her tactical coordinator for multi-site operations. "No casualties on our side. 6 Castellano soldiers in custody for interrogation." Maya studied the tactical display showing real-time positions of Vincent's strike teams. "What about the South Side drug processing facility? Any resistance from local law enforcement?" "Negative. Detective Morrison's people are maintaining their patrol routes according to the schedule we provided." Marco's tone carried the matter-of-fact acceptance of police corruption that Maya had learned was standard in Vincent's operations. "Team Bravo has 20 minutes to complete their sweep before the next patrol cycle." Vincent entered the office, carrying coffee and the morning intelligence briefings that had become part of their daily routine since Maya's elevation to partner status. He moved with fluid grace despite the shoulder injury that was still healing, his expensive suit tailored to accommodate the shoulder holster that he now wore constantly. "Progress report," Vincent said, settling into the chair beside Maya's position at the tactical command station. "Castellano's lost 3 major revenue sources in the past week, plus the manpower to guard his remaining operations," Maya replied, highlighting positions on the digital map of Chicago. "Our interrogation of his lieutenant confirmed that he's down to maybe 40 reliable soldiers, most of them concentrated around his personal compound in Bridgeport." Vincent studied the tactical assessment with the calculating attention he brought to all strategic decisions. Estimated timeline until he's forced to negotiate or escalate? 72 hours, maybe less. He's hemorrhaging money and manpower faster than he can replace either. Maya pulled up financial intelligence showing Castellano's declining cash flow. Vincent, he's going to make a desperation play. Either he comes to us asking for terms, or he attempts something spectacular to demonstrate that he's still a threat. Vincent's expression darkened slightly. Define spectacular. Maya highlighted several potential targets on the tactical display. Vincent's legitimate businesses, family members of his key lieutenants, and the memory care facility where her mother lived. He knows that attacking our operations directly hasn't worked. His next move will be targeting people we care about who can't defend themselves. The analysis was clinical, logical, and terrifying in its implications. Tommy Castellano was facing the complete destruction of his criminal empire, which made him exponentially more dangerous than when he had been operating from a position of strength. Maya's right, Marco added from his communications station. Our sources inside Castellano's organization report increasing desperation and talk about sending a message that reminds everyone why the Castellano name should be feared. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, processing the intelligence while watching Maya coordinate multiple operations with the efficiency of someone who had found her true calling. Recommendations? Maya turned to face him fully, her dark eyes holding the same steady authority she had displayed during the warehouse firefight. We accelerate the timeline. Instead of waiting for Castellano to make his desperation play, we force a confrontation on our terms, in a location we control, with tactical advantages that ensure our survival. You're talking about an assassination, Vincent said quietly. I'm talking about eliminating a threat that will otherwise kill innocent people to make a point about his remaining power. Maya's voice carried absolute conviction. Vincent, Tommy Castellano forfeited any claim to honourable treatment the moment he coordinated Tony's betrayal. This isn't murder, it's justice with efficiency. Vincent studied Maya's face, seeing the transformation that had occurred since she had first killed to protect him. The woman who had once treated gunshot wounds with reluctant professionalism had become someone who planned military operations with tactical brilliance and moral clarity. What did you have in mind? Vincent asked. Maya activated a detailed floor plan of Castellano's private social club in Little Italy, the location where he conducted business and felt most secure. Friday evening, Castellano hosts his weekly poker game with the few allies he has left. Same location, same security protocols he's used for 8 years. Heavily fortified location with multiple escape routes, Marco observed. Hard target for a traditional assault. Maya smiled with predatory satisfaction. Not if the assault comes from someone he's never met, someone with medical credentials who has a legitimate reason to be in the building. Vincent's eyebrows rose with interest. Explain. One of Castellano's regular poker players is Dominic Graziano, 73 years old, diabetic, recovering from minor heart surgery last month. Maya pulled up medical records that her contacts in the hospital system had provided. Graziano requires regular health monitoring during any stressful activity. A private physician checking on his condition during the poker game wouldn't raise suspicions. Maya, you're talking about walking into a room full of armed criminals with minimal backup and no clear escape route, Vincent said, his voice carrying the protective instinct that had become automatic whenever Maya proposed putting herself in danger. I'm talking about being in position to eliminate the primary threat before he can escalate to attacking civilians. Maya moved closer to Vincent, close enough to see the conflict warring in his green eyes. Vincent, we've established that I'm your partner in this organization. Let me prove that partnership includes the ability to handle operations independently. Vincent looked at the tactical assessment, then at Maya's face, then at the reports confirming Castellano's declining options and increasing desperation. What kind of backup support? Marco coordinates external security. You position assets for extraction if things go wrong, and I handle the primary objective with surgical precision." Maya's confidence was absolute and well-founded. "Vincent, I've spent 3 weeks studying Castellano's patterns, his security protocols, his psychological profile. I know exactly how he'll react to every scenario. And if something goes wrong, if your cover gets blown, or if he has security we haven't identified." Maya reached for Vincent's hand, interlacing their fingers with the familiar intimacy that had become natural between them. "Then you'll do exactly what I did in that warehouse, whatever is necessary to make sure we both survive." Vincent was quiet for several minutes, processing the tactical merits of Maya's proposal against his instinctive reluctance to let her face danger alone. Finally, he squeezed her hand gently. "Approval granted. But Maya, this operation is planned and executed according to military protocols, with contingencies for every possible failure point." Vincent's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to life-or-death decision-making. "No improvisation, no heroics, no unnecessary risks." Maya's smile was brilliant and confident. "Vincent Torino, you're going to be amazed at what I can accomplish when I have proper planning time and clear objectives." Marco looked up from his communications console with an expression that mixed admiration and concern. "Dr. Chen, with respect, you're talking about assassinating a crime boss in his own stronghold. Even with perfect planning, the margin for error is minimal." Marco: "6 months ago, I was clearing tables for tips and worrying about rent payments. 3 weeks ago, I eliminated 3 armed threats in a firefight while performing battlefield medicine under pressure." Maya's voice carried the confidence of someone who had discovered capabilities she never knew she possessed. "I've learned that the margin for error is only as minimal as your preparation allows it to be." Vincent stood and walked to the office's reinforced windows, looking out at the Chicago skyline where afternoon shadows were beginning to stretch across the urban landscape. Maya watched the tension build in his shoulders, recognizing the internal conflict between his protective instincts and his respect for her tactical abilities. "Maya," Vincent said without turning around, "when this is over, when Castellano is eliminated and the immediate threat is neutralized, what do you want our lives to look like?" The question caught Maya off guard. Since accepting Vincent's partnership offer, she had focused entirely on tactical necessities and operational planning. The idea of a future beyond immediate survival had seemed like a luxury they couldn't afford. "I want our lives to look like we're building something together that's worth all the prices we've paid to get here," Maya said quietly. "I want to wake up knowing that the people we protect are safe, that the choices we've made have created something better than what existed before." Vincent turned to face her, his green eyes holding warmth and determination in equal measure. "Then Friday's operation isn't just about eliminating Tommy Castellano. It's about removing the last obstacle between us and the future we want to build." Maya stood and moved to Vincent's side, looking out at the city that had become their shared territory. "Then we better make sure Friday goes perfectly." As the sun began to set over Chicago, Maya Chen realized that she had travelled further from her origins than geographical distance could measure. The woman who had served coffee to strangers had become someone who planned assassinations with tactical precision and moral certainty. Friday evening would determine whether that transformation had prepared her for the final test of survival in Vincent Torino's world. Whether she could eliminate threats with the same steady hands that had once treated injuries. Whether she had truly become the queen Vincent claimed she was meant to be.